across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. It's coming up 3 minutes past 10, and whether you're listening on DAB Plus radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube, or you're connected to us, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Lots to talk about. If you miss anything from the show, don't forget to go to my YouTube page, the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Hit subscribe, and you never have to miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, we are going to be discussing Tony Blair's unprecedented attack on Keir Starmer's record in office, saying he has no coherent plan to fix Britain. Former Prime Minister says Labour will lose the next election unless it ditches the drive for net zero, cuts back on welfare spending and does whatever it takes to stop the migrant boats. 1,000 illegal migrants having arrived across the English Channel only yesterday. I mean, he's not wrong, is he, Tony Blair? He's not wrong, apart from the fact that, of course, the legal migration on a mass scale started under his watch. We're going to be talking about that. I want to get your views on that as well. Also, of course, that latest Ofgem price cap, as predicted, although it's actually worse than many experts had predicted. Our household bills will see an extra £221 on average over the year, an increase 13% as a result of the war in Iran, driving up energy costs. Of course, finally, I think it's about 40% of people are on fixed energy bills, so they'll be all right for now. Everyone else, you know, buckle up, guys. It's going to be a bumpy ride. And, of course, all related to net zero, but not just the Iran war, because we are massively more affected than many other countries. Why? Because of mad net zero policies from the Tories and from the current Labour government. And Ed Miliband, as usual, the net zero secretary, has been doubling down, as you would have expected, from a hysterical climate change lunatic. I think that is not an incorrect description of his views on this issue. But there we are. I want to hear from you. I mean, I don't know many people who are going to read the full 5,700 words that Tony Blair has written in this essay on the Tony Blair Institute webpage. I doubt Tony Blair's read all of them, to be honest with you. I think he has people who write these things for him. But he says that Keir Starmer has no coherent plan to fix Britain, but he also crucially says that changing leader won't be enough to save Labour. He says it's about the policies. It's not the message, it's not the personality, it's about the policies. What is your reaction to that? Now, whether you're a Tony Blair fan or whether you are a Tony Blair hater, whether it's the Iraq war or migration or whatever, surely you can't disagree that his analysis of what needs to be done now is right, isn't it? I mean, should we bring Tony Blair back? I mean, he's not a lord. He's just got his knighthood, Sir Tony. I mean, given the choices that we're going to be stuck with for the next 2.5 years or 3 years after the inevitable happens and Keir Starmer's ousted, I mean, I'd take Tony Blair over Andy Burnham or Ed Miliband or Angie Rayner or any of the others, wouldn't you? Maybe I'm being too gentle. Maybe I've got little rose-tinted glasses for the past, given all of the problems that Tony Blair left, the landmines he left across not just our economy, but our culture, with many of the policies he had. I want to hear your thoughts. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. You can text the word TALK and your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X as well, at Talk TV. Calls are charged the national rate, and text costs £1, standard network message. And you knew all that anyway. Delighted to say Claire Pearsall, as always on a Wednesday, joins us, former Conservative Government Advisor. Very good morning to you.
Morning.
I do want to touch briefly on the energy bills, because actually what a former Prime Minister says about future politics is one thing, and it is relevant and it is important, it's worth discussing. But people right now are going to be going, how much are my energy bills going up? If you are on joint gas electricity from the same firm, which is most people, if you're not on a fixed price, again, most people, you are going to be hit with a £221 increase in your household energy bills from July. Now, it's expected to go up again. Now, we had the price. They do this thing, don't they? They do a price cut and then they do a price cut. Now, this is the first time that our energy bills are specifically impacted by the Iran conflict. And look, everyone around the world is being impacted by that, even in America, where they're fracking and they're the biggest, oil producer in the world now. They're still impacted by it. But no other country in Europe, no other wealthy country, no other G7 country has been remotely as impacted as we have been. That's not me saying it. That's the IMF, that's OECD and others. They're saying we are uniquely impacted. Why? because we are not drilling for oil and gas new licences in the North Sea, because we're too reliant on unreliable renewables. We don't have gas storage. We haven't built nuclear power stations. I mean, we're not fracking. I mean, you name it, every policy. So our bills are going to go up to an average bill every year, average £1,862 a year. That is a shed load of cash coming out of people's pockets when their other taxes have gone up, when they're paying more council tax, they're paying the other bill, everything, your phone bill, everything's gone up. That is going to have a real impact on people.
It is. It's going to be enormous, because it doesn't mean that you can really save in any areas, because you still need to put the lights on, you still need to be able to cook and use the appliances that you have at home, you need to be able to wash your clothes.
You need to be able to heat your home when it gets cold.
And then heat your home. So if it's going up now in July to this, what is it going to be October, November time? Because it's going to be enormous. And that's when the weather comes colder and wetter.
I mean, most people, it's sort of averaged over the years, so you pay quite a lot. You know, you pay more than you use in June and July.
Yes.
So you can pay less than you use in January and Feb and even out those bills.
But it doesn't make any difference these days, because people's bills per month are just going to be enormous, irrespective. You used to be able to have a little bit of a breathing space in the summer. I always remember that. It always came as such a relief. You don't get that these days.
No, absolutely not. But don't worry, they're going to give a 5% VAT discount or wherever it is on going to Alton Towers. I mean, surely that makes a difference to everybody.
So you can spend an extra couple of £100 on your energy bills, but you can get sort of £1.50 off.
Summer of savings, Claire. Summer of savings last week.
Honestly,
did you not get the fanfare?
£2 saving on some tickets, when realistically people need to be able to buy food.
And you're getting all this free stuff, people. You know, free this, free that, free childcare, free bus fares, free that. Yeah, but people just want to be able to afford their own bills and then pay their own way. Thank you very much.
But it's not free.
It's not free. Someone pays. The money comes from nowhere other than our pockets. Let's talk about Tony Blair, though, because I mean, this essay is extraordinary. 5,700 words. And, I mean, he's really not pulling his punches. He's saying that Keir Starmer has no coherent plan to fix Britain, his words. It's unprecedented. He's actually not, in the last 2 years, actually publicly criticised Keir Starmer. He makes points about policy. He hasn't actually criticised that. He's accused the Prime Minister of retreating into a left-wing comfort zone, so higher taxes, more red tape. He says that is crippling growth and it's failing to tackle the ballooning welfare bill. He said that it would be dangerous for the party to lurch to the left. He said basically this isn't an issue of personalities, it's about policy. In this particular few sentences is worth listening to. The government's principal problem isn't Keir's personality or a failure to communicate our achievements or a need to assert more strongly Labour's values. It's because we don't have a worked-out, coherent plan for the country in a fast-changing world and are in the wrong political position from which we can devise one and win a second term. The government is governing from an essentially traditional Labour soft-left position parked firmly in the party's comfort zone. He's very critical of issue of welfare and basically saying, you know, not carrying through the most basic minimal reforms they had promised. He's talking about net zero. They should water down these flagship policies. The workers' rights bill, that was from Angela Rayner, Ed Miliband's net zero drive. It said we need to be, you know, closer to America. Whether you like Trump or not, you've got to be close to America because they are, our biggest partner. He says whether there is a leadership change or not is irrelevant if it doesn't start with a policy debate. Trying to force the Prime Minister out before we know what policy direction we're bringing in is not a serious way of conducting ourselves. Now, he's perfectly nice about Wes Streeting and about Andy Burnham, but basically saying, you know, the policies that these people are looking at are going to be a disaster. He also talks about AI being a massive, big part of our future and having affordable energy. It is worth noting that one of the biggest funders of the Tony Blair Institute, which racks in millions of pounds a year, is actually a big, AI boss. I mean, but as he said, he's defended himself on the radio this morning, saying, it's because we are, our views align rather than this man is telling me what to think. Amazingly, I don't think he's actually suggested we have digital ID cards as the solution to everything, which surprises me, Sir Tony. Nice that you can take a break from that occasionally. But I've got to be honest with you, reading through it, I can't see anything I disagree with.
No, I read it this morning, all of it, and
someone had to.
Somebody had to. I took that on. But it is interesting because I don't disagree with a lot of what he says, which is a really uncomfortable space to be in as a Conservative. But he's saying that you need to have a political philosophy. And it doesn't matter what that is. You have to have one. And if you look at who our most successful prime ministers have been, there is Margaret Thatcher and Tony Blair.
Yeah.
And they both had philosophies, whether you agreed or disagreed or took
There was
parts
a
of it.
coherent plan.
There was, and they brought the public along with them. So they had that plan, and then they persuaded the public that it was the right way to go about it. And this is what he's advocating. And I think at the moment we're seeing politics as just very knee-jerk reaction.
Well,
very
it's a
swift
social media
U-turn.
ban. The Prime Minister saying he wasn't mind to do that. We'll see what Australia does. But, you know, Angela Rayner, Wes Streeting, lots of, you know, sadly, parents who've lost their children, they're saying, well, we should do it. And even if the evidence is against it, that it doesn't work and it might create more dangers of itself, it's on its own, odds are, it's been reported the last 2 days, he's going to go for a social media ban for under 16s. And again, because people are asking for that. No, you should come up with a policy that works, and then you explain to people why that policy would work, as opposed to, oh, we've done a bit of focus grouping, and someone thinks we should do that. Now, I'm all in favour of policies that reflect what the public want. Like, you know, if the public say we would like a mass cut in migration, don't ignore that, which he did. So, but again, there was no coherence there. And I mean, you know, I don't want to give him a sort of, you know, a clean bill of health, because at the end of the day, a lot of the problems we've got in this country, both culturally, in terms of welfare dependency, in terms of lack of technology and investment and growth, have actually been down to key policy of his. Well, there were two. One was Gordon Brown with, like, just putting everyone on the payroll, you know, working tax credits, this, you know. I mean, again, all very well, but basically you're subsidising low wages, you know, but through taxes. It's not free money, it's our money. But also, crucially, mass uncontrolled immigration of a like our country has never seen in 1,000 years. He started that with the EU. He set that ball in motion. And here we are inevitably. But one of the reasons why lots of companies didn't invest was because they had this unlimited supply of cheap labour. That's put the pressure on housing, that's put the pressure on families. One of the reasons why people aren't having more kids, because they can't afford to, because they're stuck in one-bedroom flats when they'd like to have a family of 3. I mean, he's responsible for a lot of the things that have gone wrong.
Yes, he is. And there's also still that shadow of the Iraq war that hangs over him. So you take...
Still think he was right. It was badly executed.
And a lot of people,
I still defend him on that.
Do you know what? There are
Apart
people
from the lie, the 45-minute dossier was a lie.
I was going to say,
the dossier was a lie, but the reason to go in was right.
Absolutely, but that will always hang over him. So people won't necessarily look at the sort of the nuances of it. They'll just say he was responsible for that and the loss of service personnel. So he's got that hanging over him. The welfare reform stuff is quite interesting, because he's now advocating for better welfare reform when he was the one that pretty much gave it to everybody, aided by
other than it was Gordon. He basically abdicated all responsibility for domestic policy and handed everything over to Gordon Brown.
Yes,
who put everyone on the payroll.
No, if you're prime minister.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that he needs to hold the responsibility for that.
But is he right that actually you need to decide your policies and then put someone in place, or have someone in place who advocates the right policies, as opposed to, oh, Andy Burnham wears a T-shirt instead of a tie. It's got quite nice eyelashes. Let's put him in. I mean, but that is basically what the Labour Party is saying right now.
It is. They come up with an idea of a policy. I mean, take winter fuel allowance. That was one policy where everybody then went absolutely mad, said, you can't do it, this is awful, pensioners are revolting. And they said, oh, this is really unpopular, we don't like it. So, and apart from saying, I'm not going to U-turn on it, lo and behold, they U-turned on it and actually made it more expensive.
But it was a bad policy.
But it doesn't matter. If you look at it and say this is a bad policy because, and we are sticking to it, people will get over that and they will go on to moan about other things, because that's politics. But they didn't. They just buckled and U-turned and made it more expensive by trying to means test it and then upset everybody equally another time.
But I'm sorry, I'm very much of the view that, you know, I don't think that my parents should get winter fuel allowance.
No, but
I don't think my parents worry about their heating bills. I think, you know, why are we giving people who don't need that money? But
the problem is when you have a universal benefit like that, to take it away is incredibly difficult.
Yeah, I know, exactly. But I mean, it's fascinating. I want to hear from you. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Tony Blair putting his tuppence worth in. This is the, I mean, he won't go away. He's like a bad smell on that front, isn't he? He will not go away. But actually, I mean, I'm sorry, I think he talks more sense than most of the latest generation of Labour people. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Let's also talk about what the hell is going on, both inside Reform and between Reform and Restore. Restore being, of course, Rupert Lowe's party that is vying for the right-wing vote in the Makerfield by-election. But I mean, first of all, let's talk about what's going on between Reform and Reform. We've got Zia Youssef, who is the Home Affairs spokesman for Reform, and we've got Robert Jenrick, who, you know, the incomer, the Tory incomer, who is their sort of their Treasury spokesman. And basically, there's been a bit of a row, but again, a public row. And again, these people have got the idea that if I had a row with, like, you know, a colleague or a boss, that I would, like, just put it on social media. I find it very, very bizarre that people don't understand. Like, you're in your workplace. Like, have a quiet, private, civilised meeting about it, for goodness sake. But Zia Youssef criticised Robert Jenrick over deportation policy. Jenrick at the weekend claimed that foreign nationals would not exclusively face deportation if they lived in council accommodation. Now, this is a view that, you know, if you're not a net contributor, if you're in social housing, by definition, you're not a net contributor, and you should be among the people who would face deportation. Well, that's a bit difficult because Jenrick said, you know, said this. Youssef says, well, those comments are not Reform policy. He says, as the person responsible for our deportation plan, I want to ensure people know where we stand. If a foreign national lives in social housing at taxpayer expense, they automatically fail our economic test and will be deported. But here's the thing. Let's have a reality check. They're looking at deporting some 600,000 illegal migrants. People say there are about 1 million legal migrants. Looking at the numbers, some latest numbers, you know, I mean, realistically, I think we're probably in the 2 million mark. I think I'd be very surprised to learn there aren't 2 million people who've overstayed their visas and are working here illegally or living here illegally, somehow getting benefits, no business to be here. We need to prioritise them first. But realistically, is Reform going to be able to deport people who were here illegally, who come here legally, who have even been working but are not paying much tax? I don't think that's going to happen. And I think we've got a really big problem here. Labour's had this problem as well, which is, you know, don't promise stuff you realistically either won't be able to do or won't be able to get round to.
And that's the problem, is it sounds very nice on the surface. It sounds a very sensible, pragmatic, you're going to get rid of these people, you're going to deport them, but the practicalities of it are very, very different, and you come up against an awful lot of problems. And if somebody has been here legally, they have been contributing, what are you going to do? Where are you going to send them?
I'm not sure a lot of people would be. I mean, if you don't think we should deport all the illegally working or illegally arrivals,
that's a different
if you don't think that, you're just mad. And I can't even have political discourse with you, because on what basis do you think you have a country if you just allow anyone to come here? But if people are here legally and they're working but they're not earning very much and they've been entitled to a council house, that's a problem with our policies. That's take away the council house entitlement. I mean, take away all of that, and then, you know, if you can't stand on your own 2 feet, well, you don't get benefits because you're not a British national. I mean, we need to change the rules. So actually, you know what? It's not a very nice place to, you know, you can't afford to make a living. So do you know what people will do? They'll go home.
Exactly.
But you don't have to deport them. And I think a lot of people will be very unhappy about the idea of deporting people who have come here legally or who even may be working here.
And that's your problem, isn't it? So why are you sending them? Why are you deporting them? Because you don't believe that they're a benefit, but if they're working and they're contributing, then
but they're still not a net benefit.
No, but there are an awful lot of people that aren't.
No,
and you don't know
most Britons don't make a net contribution.
And you don't know if that person, if they've been here 5 years, are they going to make a larger contribution later on? But they are here legally, so we need to make that defining
I don't think
moment.
you should be entitled to a council accommodation.
No.
I just don't. I just find it very complicated. I don't understand on what basis do we give this. I mean, refugees, okay, but again, it should be for a limited period of time, and after that point, you're going to have to get on your own 2 feet. Well, we expect you to be fluent in English, after, you know, by the end of 2 years, and we expect you to have a job.
But isn't this a policy issue? Because council housing shouldn't be a long-term prospect for people. It should be something there to ensure
people
that you have a
expect
roof
their
over your
kids
head.
to inherit,
and that
blows my mind.
Yeah. And that is where it is wrong, because if my child, you know, will inherit my house,
that's because it's your house.
Absolutely, but he's going to have to pay the tax on that as well. So it's not as if it's.
But you
free
don't own your council. I mean, I know people who fairly elderly now, but who've had a council property now worth an absolute fortune. And you know, 2 bedrooms when they've only needed 1, but they needed it at the time when they had young kids, they were single parent, things like that. And great, and I'm glad the state was there to help. But the idea that you get to keep that for life, I find utterly perplexing. Especially as actually my parents, who can afford to stay in big properties, have all downsized.
Yes.
So most people actually do downsize, and those properties are now free to for a family.
Yeah.
But they don't. But they don't think they've got a right to just stay, even though they can afford to. Well, I just think I find the entitlement attitude that people have utterly perplexing. I mean, I can't even get my head around it, where that comes from. And the idea that you feel entitled if you're not even from this country blows my mind.
Yeah. But I think that we need to look at property in this country, and we've always had a problem with rental properties. If you look across Europe, renting is a really common thing.
Yeah.
But in this country, it's now so expensive to do, and it's become so elite.
You can have like a 10-year lease. It's very
Absolutely.
Let's also talk about Restore then, because we've got this ongoing battle between Restore and Reform, and this challenge and the idea that Reform could win the Makerfield by-election, but they may be losing votes to Restore. Rupert Lowe, the leader, of course, Reform MP, he's been claiming on social media, which is largely where Restore exists, I'm afraid, reality check people, that they're getting the same sort of returns as they believe Reform are, and that they are neck and neck with Reform in the Makerfield by-election. Now, despite the fact that there was a poll, I think about 6 months ago, and even the vast majority, or was it a year ago, even the vast majority of people who were Reform voters had never heard of Rupert Lowe. I mean, he's invited on the show. Apparently, he can't come on this week. Rupert, I'd love to have you on. I'd love to talk to you about all of this. But they've been involved in quite a big row over anti-Semitism among some high-profile supporters and officials. And basically, they're refusing to disavow statements that included calling for the deportation of Jews. And insinuations that Nigel Farage had been bought by Jewish money. Far-right activist Steve Laws, one of their highest-profile supporters, he runs a group campaigning for the total deportation of those with non-white heritage from Britain. He's encouraged people on his, who support him to campaign for the party. And he says Jews should be removed from the country. They are foreign. He's branded Adolf Hitler, quote, a misunderstood politician. He's cast doubt on the true number of people murdered in the Holocaust. I mean, come on, people. This is beyond the pale stuff. And Restore won't disavow that. No, I'm sorry. You're not a serious party, and you're certainly not a party that I think most right-minding people will. I mean, whatever your views on immigration and wanting a tougher line than even Reform have, those are unacceptable views, and you need to say nothing to do with us.
And I find the explanation of it from Rupert Lowe to say, well, he's not really part of Restore and this is nothing to do with us.
Then you can disavow it, yeah.
But you should just go out there and set out what it is you believe. As the leader of a party, you need to tell people what it is and what you will accept from people who also support you and those who work with you. It is quite simple.
It's very straightforward, isn't it? Can we also just talk briefly about those three teenage boys, two of them convicted of multiple rape charges, it has to be said, multiple rape charges, 11 charges between them, of two schoolgirls, two separate occasions, one at knife point, put on social media, laughing, who extraordinarily, with another boy who was egging them on in the most disgusting fashion, who also got convicted. But they got suspended, no sentence at all, just referral orders, no sentence behind bars. That is, the Attorney General, Lord Herman, has referred that to Court of Appeal. They're going to look at whether or not those decisions were too lenient. But I mean, there's a lot of concern about, was it because these boys were young? The judge had said, oh, well, these, I don't want to unnecessarily criminalise you, but, you're not unnecessarily criminalising someone who's committed multiple rape and on more than one occasion. And the argument being they've got low IQ, one's got ADHD, they're from a traveller group, and guests we've spoken to, experts, were saying actually, they actually exhibit all of the signs of people who are likely to go on to even more offending, perhaps even of a more serious nature. It's not much more serious than rape. And there's just, I wonder whether because they're from a traveller community, and therefore one of the mitigating circumstances in sentencing is someone from a disadvantaged group. I don't think this should be relevant at all, but I think a lot of people are wondering, was that a factor?
I don't know. I wouldn't want to put words into the judge's mouth, but it does on the surface look like it. But where is the concern for the victims in all of this? So we're concerned
who are unnecessarily victimised.
Absolutely. So we're concerned about these individuals who commit a heinous act because they may have low IQ, but the victims who have had to deal with all of this and will have to continue dealing with
for
it
the rest of their lives.
Absolutely no justice for them at all.
I mean, it's just
appalling.
inconceivable. Also, again, if people are really sorry, if they don't understand the nature of the crime, they definitely need to be behind bars.
Precisely.
If they do understand it, and you want them to be, then they need. You can only repent if you have actually accepted what you did was wrong, and therefore accepted your sentence. There are no grounds whatsoever on which these young boys should not be behind bars, and for a long time. 10:27 is time. Love to hear your thoughts on all the big stories, but particularly Tony Blair basically saying that Keir Starmer has no coherent plan to fix Britain. Changing the leader will not be enough to save Labour. I mean, he's right about that, isn't he? Love to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. This is Talk.
If your other half came home with £125,000 worth of motorhome, wouldn't you go, darling, where did you get that from? Yeah. Have that turned up on the driveway? Where did you get the motorhome from? It's a very expensive motorhome. £81,000 Jaguar, Volkswagen Golf, partly funded with stolen cash, luxury watches over 9,000 quid, Mont Blanc pens, a £3,232 coffee machine. Like, what was the man doing?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 10:30 is the time. Let's get straight to your calls. 0344 499 1000 to have your say, particularly on Tony Blair saying he has Keir Starmer has no coherent plan to fix Britain. Francis is in London, wants to have his say. Good morning to you, Francis.
Yes, good morning. I just wish Tony Blair would just sort of disappear and just not, interfere in any way in our modern politics. This man has done enough damage, and lasting damage. And the thing is...
In what way?
In the way that, look, for example, we have Tony Blair now in this so-called Council of Peace with Mr. Trump. I would rather he advise Mr. Trump to stop his warmongering ways, which is affecting our cost of living crisis at the moment. That's what he should be spending his time doing.
He should be stopping the war in Iran rather than... it's worthwhile to be on that Council of Peace in Gaza, isn't it? We've still got a ceasefire pretty much there.
Oh, no, what ceasefire? A Council of Peace, it's laughable. What does it actually mean? A Council of Peace, it's another money-making scheme for Trump and his... You
had to pay to join it. Yeah, OK. I don't have much time for that. But hold on a minute. But OK, in terms of what Tony Blair did to this country, what was the damage he did to this country, do you believe?
I really feel that Tony Blair... got this country entangled in a lot of very complex affairs internationally, which really, in the long run, had a detrimental effect.
You mean like Iraq and Afghanistan?
Exactly, and Libya and all whatnot. It snowballed from there. I really do think Tony Blair really would be doing this country and a lot of people a favor if he faded away and enjoyed the millions and millions he has made from his nefarious unions with very, very questionable dictators around the world.
I wouldn't go so far as saying nefarious for legal reasons. However, yeah, I mean, he's certainly another one who happily takes the cash from advising various dictators. There's no doubt about it. You've basically got you don't think he's got anything useful to tell this government?
No, I don't think so. I think we are in a state now where, first of all, we have to understand that a lot of countries in the world are struggling at the moment, and it will help, the world if Tony Blair could have a sit down with Mr. Trump and advise him on his warmongering ways.
Well, yeah, okay. You say warmonger. I don't think I'd call Donald Trump a warmonger on that front. I mean, if you're taking on the Iranian mullahs with their nuclear weapons, I don't think he's done it a good way, but I'm all in favour of him doing that because, unfortunately, you need someone who's willing to face up to these people. But we disagree on that. But, Francis, I'm sure your view is very widely held, though. Thank you for your call. Robert's in Hertfordshire. Robert, what do you want to say about Blair?
Yeah, good morning, Julia. I actually phoned up your desk a minute after you was on air because you annoyed me straight away. I mean, I love you to bits. We spoke many times, but let's get a few things straight. Tony Blair is a war criminal. He's a Fabian.
He's not a war criminal. He's not.
Well, he should have been tried for war crimes.
Why?
With the war against Iraq, with Bush as well. He's a Fabian and he's a fifth columnist.
Wait a minute. No, but why? He's not this war criminal thing. They definitely lied. The dossier, the 45 minutes attack, that was the dossier was a lie. I mean, from start to finish. But I'm sorry, but going in and taking out Saddam Hussein, I haven't got an issue with that.
Oh, do you want to explain that to the thousands of parents whose sons died then?
You mean our soldiers?
For getting involved in the war in the first place.
But then again, that's the suggestion that it had nothing to do with us. She's like, we went because I think Iraq posed a massive threat in the Middle East at the time, and it posed a threat to its people. I think we could have done the war a lot better. I think there wasn't enough planning, massive corruption, all that. I accept all of that, but I think the actual principle, personally, I still stand by it.
Well, do you know what? Unfortunately, it seems like without the dictators in the Middle East, it's gone absolute nuts. I think the world, our side of the world was better off when there was dictators.
Well, as long as the dictators aren't waging war on us or funding, terrorists like the Ayatollah. But I mean, but the trouble is we don't get a say. The only country that's democracy in the Middle East. Israel, that's why they should be our ally.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm a proud Zionist. Yep. I mean, I am, and I will be to the day that I die.
Yeah. Okay, but
if I could just quickly switch it to the right, you've got three people there on the right. They're all narcissists. No, I can't even say it. You know what
narcissists,
I mean? Narcissists. Right, Rupert Lowe, and I am a member of Reform, but...
Okay, Nigel Farage then. But who's the third one?
There's one pure person with no... And that's Tommy Robinson. I don't care what you say.
I'm sorry, mate. You've got... People, genuinely... I know there's some of the things that he's been saying, he's been right about certain aspects of certain things. I'm telling you, this is a man who is about... Tell me what Tommy Robinson cares about. Tommy Robinson. That's the only thing Tommy Robinson cares about. Trust me, he doesn't give two hoots about this country or you at all. I promise you he doesn't. That is it blows my mind how many people are fooled by him. Trust me. Robert, thank you for that. 10:36 is the time. I'm going to take a quick break. Then we're going to be talking to Ian Duncan Smith. What does he make as a former party leader? Talking about a former party leader of the Labour Party giving his tuppence worth. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 10:38 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's get straight to my next guest, former Conservative Party leader, Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, MP. A very good morning to you, Sir Ian.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, it's very interesting to have a Sir Ian, former Conservative Party leader, in to talk about Sir Tony, former Labour Party leader and Prime Minister, of course, about what he's had to say. I mean, hard-hitting essay that the former Labour Prime Minister has written, basically saying, for all intents and purposes, Keir Starmer has no plan. There is no coherent plan to fix Britain. Major policy areas that he believes that the party is wrong on. And he's saying that it's not about personalities or communication or changing the leader, it's about the policies. I'm wondering if there's a single word of his essay that you disagree with.
Well, not really. I think that he's not a sort of soothsayer. You can see this a mile off, frankly. Yeah. I mean, the truth with this is I think where this government has gone wrong, and I know I'm in opposition, I'm bound to say this, but I'm going to make this observation because it's having known what it's like to get into government in charge of the biggest spending department, you have to arrive and hit the ground really hard and move. So you have to have made your plans up as to how you're going to do things immediately, and then you simply consult with civil servants as to what can be done, what can't be done, but you're moving. Legislation that's necessary, got to get it done. I've always said, you basically in government, you have 2 years after election to get all of your things through. After that, you are hit by problems from some of those and other problems arising, as Macmillan said, events. Then that tends to knock you backwards for the next 2.5 years. So you're always having to repair the damage whilst you try and make progress on the things you want. Yeah. What was intriguing about this government is it seemed to have arrived with this landslide. By the way, a landslide achieved only on 33% of the poll, a sort of absolute record low for a landslide. But that notwithstanding, they seem to have managed to have arrived and then stood still.
There didn't appear to be any plan. We all assumed, they're just not putting it in the manifesto, and when it said change in big letters, that they did have a plan for things to do. They didn't want to tell us what they were. But it really does appear that they just kind of wanted to get elected. And then everything would be better.
They didn't want people like you, Julia, to pick apart what they would then produce. So they decided the only way to do that and not risk the leaks is not to have detailed policy. And that's where their problem came. And then they hit the buffers with a budget which seemed to have been in la-la land. I mean, the fact is, if you want growth, the worst thing you can do is crush small business. Small business produces the lion's share of the jobs in the United Kingdom, particularly the starter jobs and the ones that the young people will want to take on. That's what shops and small, one-man bands, family businesses, they produce more jobs than all the other big companies put together. So you want to nurture those, you want to give them the scope to create more jobs and to grow, instead of which he hammered them with national insurance charges, a huge hike in the minimum wage, and now legislation that means it's very difficult to get rid of somebody who turns out to be a major problem. If you hire somebody for a certain period of time, you're going to have to give them a contract on the basis of what you gave them as the hours as a temporary worker. This is like madness. And then on top of that, all the council tax, the business rates, rose dramatically in my area, some of them rising by 60%.
Ouch.
So how do you run a business, or particularly a small shop? You can't afford to take somebody on because the starting rate for national insurance is now at 5,000.
Yeah, but this is the thing. People in charge who've never run a business have no understanding whatsoever of how the sums add up. Now, you mentioned the fact that when you hit the ground running, you were you were Work and Pension Secretary, but. You pushed through quite a lot of changes there. What do you make of Tony Blair? I mean, he's talking about we need to cut the welfare bill. An awful lot of that welfare bill was massively expanded under Tony Blair, and with Gordon Brown as his chancellor. He sort of, abdicated responsibility for pretty much all domestic policy and left it to Gordon Brown. He put everyone on the payroll. You were kind of winding back a lot of that. And the other thing he didn't mention was, of course, well, barely in passing, was mass immigration. When he talks about growth and he talks about, welfare and a lot of the problems in society, a lot of this comes down to having opened the doors to uncontrolled mass immigration of cheap labour, which massively hit, and great for businesses who can hire people, but massively hit the rest of the economy.
Yeah, there are two elements to this. First is that you're right about Labour's record towards the end of their term. What Gordon Brown used to do, I looked at these figures, it's quite interesting. He introduced tax credits, which, by the way, probably lost anything between 12 and 20 billion pounds in the course of its introduction. Because, of course, the HMRC are not audited, which is peculiar. So we never will know those numbers at all. But what he used to do, about a year out from the election, maybe sometimes a year and a half, he would put huge amounts of money into tax credits. And then he would campaign to say that the Tories will cut your child tax credits. Yeah. So, you need to vote for us. So that was a money from government used essentially in the run to the election. But the main thing was we were left with a spiralling bill. I actually brought in the reforms that changed that and cut between 28 and 32 billion pounds out of the budget. It's hard doing that.
But Keir Starmer couldn't manage 5 billion off the rise.
No, and we got people back to work. So they had the lowest number of workless households since records began when I was there, the lowest number of children living in workless households. And we had long-term unemployment was pretty much brought to an end to the extent that you can. We had 1 million long-term unemployed, and we'd got that down so far that the program you're using no longer was able to be done by payment by results. But all of those, we arrived on that basis. I resigned eventually because I thought top slicing doesn't work on a benefit, which is what the Chancellor wanted to do. It's what the Labour Party wanted to do this time round. You have to reform everything to get people back to work. The trouble is COVID punched a massive hole through that. Politicians, I'm afraid, rather lost the plot on this one. I warned them, keep everything tight on universal credit. Keep people on universal credit. Don't invent new benefit systems. I'm afraid they did that. And then getting back from there, for example, one of the things that we have in universal credit was the absolute requirement for face-to-face interviews and the signing of a claimant commitment, which is like a contract, that you will do certain things to get a job and you will lose your benefit if you do not. Yeah. So much of that was taken away during COVID. I understand that.
And it hasn't been returned.
Very slow to get it back.
People aren't being reassessed for 2 or 3 years at a time. But
exactly
this is the thing.
Right, yeah.
In terms of when Tony Blair says, this isn't like the Labour Party, everyone thinks that Keir Starmer's, going. I mean, I think most of us are surprised he hasn't already gone. If Andy Burnham does win the Makerfield by-election, then he will run for the leadership. There may or may not be a coronation or an election, but no one thinks that Keir Starmer survives that. I mean, if he doesn't win, it's going to be a very interesting time. But he's a dead man walking right now. But Tony Blair's saying, look, this isn't about personalities. This is about policies. This is about what you're actually going to do. Is he right?
I agree with Tony Blair in this regard, because he also goes on to warn changing leaders doesn't necessarily change your prospects.
As you will well know in your party.
Well, exactly. I mean, the reality is that you think that it's all imbued in the leader. It's not. It's in the leader's policy that works. Thatcher didn't get elected because she told people straight truth. She got elected because they also brought in significant changes that got the economy growing. They also kept on building up the defence forces. We were spending about 5% of GDP on defence when she was there, and we could fight the Falklands. I was saying to somebody the other day, we had 51 frigates and destroyers available to us at the time of the Falklands. We couldn't muster up about 11 working ones now if we wanted to try. So it was about what they did. Yes, strong voices, yes, strong policy, but showing people that what you're delivering actually changed their lives, and that's why they did. But all the rest, basically, one way or the other, most changes don't result in anything else but a continuation of what was bad before. And so changing leaders doesn't necessarily change it. You want them to change the policy, change the direction. The budget's bad here. The Chancellor isn't particularly good. I'd rather change the Chancellor than change the leader, because she's critical to why this government is doing so badly at the moment.
And yet it does appear actually that the alternative options for Chancellor are so bad in terms of the market view that actually Rachel Reeves looks like the best bet. That's quite telling, I have to say. Time's against us. I wanted to ask you a little bit more. Actually, very, very briefly, can I ask you about reform and Restore UK? We've got battles. We've had, reform taking on the Tories. Now we've got Restore taking on reform. Everyone's getting squeezed. There's been talk about, which party should stand offside for Makerfield. And they're like, what do you make of all these internecine battles?
Well, I think it begins to show that in that fractured part of the right, which Reform and Restore and others represent, where people are angry and they're wanting to vote there, and I understand their anger and their concern. I mean, migration got out of control. I understand all of that. But the reality is that the one leader that seems to be calm and planning a future and being very direct, almost Thatcher-like in one sense, is Kemi. She doesn't spend her time having a go at the others. She basically gets out there, tells everybody what's wrong with the government, and has a policy for it. And I have to say that is exactly the right way in opposition that you gain strength. I see that she's recommended above all others now in party leaders. I don't blame her.
Well, I'm going to say, you would say that, wouldn't you, being a
I
Conservative?
would, yeah.
I'll
indeed.
have to leave that there. So, Ian Doug-Smith, always good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. 10:48 stuff. Claire Pearsall, look, you're also a Conservative as well. Yeah. Leaving aside that, it is interesting. He talks about government, about like, you know, having got in, being work and pension secretary, an incredibly effective minister. You have to hit the ground running. And that was the thing, this government really hasn't got a clue. And we've got no expectation that whoever takes over from Keir Starmer has a plan either. No, it was a loveless landslide that won them the election, because they essentially weren't us, and the public had told us that we didn't want that we weren't wanted. But I think Sir Ian is right when he said you've got to change your policies, not your personnel, and that's every party needs to take heed of that, because it is incredibly important. Yeah, people want a good bit of leadership. They just want people to run the country well. Yeah. Well, is that really such an impossible and unreasonable ask? Could you just be vaguely competent? Can you walk in a straight line, speak vaguely coherently without us dying a death of boredom? And could you just have some sensible policies that actually work? And I don't know, ask experts rather than a focus group about these things in terms of how to run the economy. I mean, mind-blowing ideas. They might one day catch on. 10:49's time. Let's go to a break. Up next, talking of the economy, we're going to be talking about your energy bills, which are about to, yes, what a surprise, go up again. We're going to be talking to Angela Knight, former CEO of Energy UK, about that up next. This is Talk.
If your other half came home with £125,000 worth of motorhome, wouldn't you go, darling, where did you get that from? Yeah. Have that turned up on the driveway? Where did you get the motorhome from? It's a very expensive motorhome. £81,000 Jaguar, Volkswagen Golf, partly funded with stolen cash, luxury watches over 9,000 quid, Mont Blanc pens, a £3,232 coffee machine. Like, what was the man doing?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hey, very good morning. Welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Right, well, let's talk right now about your energy bills, which, yes, I know it's going to come as a complete surprise to you, about to go up again. Ofgem this morning at 7 o'clock announced the latest price cap, and what a surprise. We long had this predicted, that after the cut the last 3 months, it's going to be going up from July. And wow, what a big rise. £221 increase in total over the year as from July. Your average bill for your joint gas electricity is going to be £1,862. That's up 13%. And they put that down to the surge in oil and gas prices as a result of the Iran conflict. Well, let's talk about this with Angela Knight. She's the former Chief Executive of Energy UK, the company representing energy companies in this, the organisation representing energy companies in this country. Angela, thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning. It's a pleasure. But it's not a pleasure to have heard that increase, is it?
No, indeed. I was just going to say, it's always a pleasure to speak to you, apart from the fact we're always doing it when it's bad news. We're never going, hey, yay, Angela, all our energy bills have halved. Isn't life great? Let's all go and spend more money on ice cream in the hot weather. It's always bad news. Explain why we have a situation where our the energy caps brought our bills down a few months ago, and as of July, they're going to go up again.
Well, they came down a little while ago simply because the government took at least some of those additional costs which they add on your bill. By they, I mean the government and its policies add on the bill. They took some of that off. It's going up now because the world price of gas has gone up, and it's gone up because of this blockage of the Straits of Hormuz and the war that's taking place there, which I think is an example of how external factors can affect us and indeed every other country, and why we need to actually be pursuing a policy which focuses on keeping the price down of our energy rather than putting it up in chasing this net zero for...
Well, this is the interesting thing, and this is something that Tony Blair, in his long essay criticising government policies, has talked about, the need to have affordable energy, especially for the future of AI, which uses absurd amounts of energy. But it's interesting, within a minute of this price cap being announced, Ed Miliband, the Energy Security or Net Zero Secretary, can't be both, he says the rise of the price cap because of a war we did not choose is deeply unwelcome news for households across the country. But we will continue to monitor the situation, he says. It's the second fossil fuel crisis of this decade. We must learn the right lessons. The way to get bills down for good, says Ed Miliband, and avoid these price spikes is to go further and faster with our drive for clean, homegrown power that we control. He wants more wind, more solar. If we had more wind and more solar, would that mean we would not be hit by a similar... Let's say in the next 10 years we went for that. Would that mean we wouldn't be hit so hard by these things like the Iran conflict?
Not necessarily, no, because you will still need something that you can switch on and power up and send electricity to our homes when the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing. That's the fundamental point. If we are going to be far more self-sufficient, there's a few things that we need to do. First of all is get building more of these small-scale nuclear reactors. Keep on talking about them. They keep being announced. Yes. We haven't yet got one going. Other countries have. But that type of nuclear power in our country, that was a very important thing.
France has got them every sort of 10 miles. You can't move for nuclear reactors.
Oh, that's fairly true. I mean, it's been into nuclear big time. They built the huge ones, and of course they're building one in this country as well. The small scale ones can be done more rapidly, and what's more, can be put up in places which are wanting the power. The second thing is that energy security is helped by us pulling gas out of the North Sea. There's no two ways about it. It is ridiculous to say we can bring it in from somewhere not very nice, but we can't do it ourselves, and especially when Norway's all tapped into the same part of the same North Sea, the same basin, if you like, as we are. Now, people will say to you that won't do anything on price. To a certain extent, they are correct, as long as that is what we're proposing to do, is continue to buy gas on the world market. Yeah. But let's see what we can do ourselves. We don't have to be totally on that world market. And there's a lot more we can do ourselves.
And it's cheaper to get the gas, but it's surely cheaper to get the gas out of our own oil field, our own gas and oil fields.
Of course it is. Of course it is.
Because it's going by pipe as opposed to liquefied.
Yeah, that's right. Putting it on board a ship and bringing it a few thousand miles. But the third thing, and you've heard me say this before, is why is it that our electricity is all priced off whatever is today's price in gas? And that is a nonsense. That's the algorithm, the equation, if you like, that we use. And that needs to be reformed.
And that's a government decision. That's not something we're always told. Well, this is what it is. So it's basically you can have 99% of your energy needs. Well, again, it's only electricity that can be renewable. And then that last bit, you need to have the gas to cover it. And the cost of that last bit of gas, that will set the price for. I mean, someone literally just made that up, didn't they?
Yes. Yes, they did. That's quite an old algorithm. I mean, if I say it's 15 years, there or thereabouts, something like that.
But it's completely unnecessary. But also, of course, we've got all these subsidies, haven't we? But the other key thing is we are not going to be moving away to the point where we're not going to need gas to heat our homes. We're not going to need gas and oil for a vast amount of things that we do. 80% of our energy needs are still, gas and energy. They're not electricity. It's a nonsense to think we won't be hit. And anyway, the rest of the world has global commodity prices, and they're not hit in the same way as us. I mean, it can't be just that.
Exactly right. Of course, the global price will affect, but it isn't the only thing. And whilst I can understand why they put together this complicated way of pricing at the start, to look at it now, it seems daft that we don't price the hydrocarbon on the hydrocarbon price and the solar on the solar price, the wind on the wind, or something along those sorts of lines. What I would call a weighted average. It's not necessarily easy, one of these things you can do overnight, and there'll always be somebody who's the wrong side of the line. Yep. But for heaven's sake, that is the way to bring down the cost of electricity in this country.
Okay,
that would be enormously helpful, and for industry as well.
Thank you so much, Angela Knight, former CEO of Energy UK. Thank you for that clip. I mean, I'm muddling my words there because I get so frustrated about the madness of this. Just insane. We are simply not hit. They're saying it's global prices. It's not, because we are far harder hit than any other country, and that's because of our mad policies.
Yeah, absolutely. We're too reliant upon shipping that stuff across to the UK when we've got oil and gas fields that we could be exploiting for our own people. I don't get the objection
gas to frack under our grounds. I mean, again, one thing Labour was saying on was like building a load of nuclear reactors. Well, where are they?
It's not even started.
Put a spade in the ground and start building the darn things. Meanwhile, your bill's going up, and they're going to go up more in the final quarter of the year. They will absolutely be going up more, especially when it doesn't look like this Iran conflict's going anywhere soon. Love to hear your thoughts on that price rise. Love to hear your thoughts on Tony Blair. Is he actually right with his analysis? Give us a call. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. It's 3 minutes past 11 o'clock. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense, and I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. And whether you're listening on DAB Plus radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, thank you so much for your company. If you do miss anything from the show, do go to my YouTube page, the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Hit subscribe, and you never have to miss a thing. Lots to talk about in this hour, including, of course, Tony Blair's unprecedented attack on Keir Starmer's record in office. He's written a 5,700-word essay saying the Prime Minister has no coherent plan to fix Britain. The former PM says Labour will lose the next election unless it ditches the drive for net zero, unless it cuts back on welfare and does whatever it can to, whatever it takes, to stop the boats. Meanwhile, on that subject, nearly 1,000 illegal migrants across the English Channel over the bank holiday weekend. Whenever we get nice weather, folks, there's always a downside. Plus, trouble in paradise over at Reform UK as Zia Youssef has publicly criticised Robert Jenrick in a row over the party's deportation policy. Plus, we're going to be talking about the latest Iranian ultimatum to Donald Trump. Tehran says they'll only sign a peace agreement with the US if the US releases $24 billion worth of Iranian frozen assets. I wonder what they'll use that money for. I'm sure it will be great largesse to the people of Iran who have struggled for so many years with economic sanctions. No, I think they'll probably just be enriching uranium with it and buying more missiles to hit Israel with. Choices, people. Choices. So much to talk about. Love to hear your thoughts on all the big topics, particularly Tony Blair, and the thoughts, of course, of Claire Pissell, former Conservative government advisor, who joins us in the studio, as always, on a Wednesday. Morning once again to you.
Morning.
Don't want you to get upset. We don't have a PMQs today.
I know.
Because they're all on their holidays. It's a
week off.
I have to say, my trains to work have been remarkably busy this week, given that it's supposed to be half term. Yeah. It's normally nice and quiet. I've worked it out, though. They've got air-conned offices, and they're all not working from home because it's too hot to work from home. I say work from home, inverted commas.
Yeah. Or the beach, as I did.
Did you?
Yesterday.
Were you actually working?
I did some work.
You see, this is, and everyone wonders why the country's on its knees.
I did what I needed to do and spent time with my family, so come on.
Were you being paid for a day's work?
Obviously.
Claire is part of the problem. Send your hate messages to Claire.
Oh, don't. This is it. I'm going to get so much hate.
No, you
for
should.
This now.
No, if you want a day off at the beach, take a day off at the beach.
But I can still work. It didn't stop me.
Was it a full day's work, though?
Yes, because I started at 6 a.m. So
all right, we might have to.
Don't have a go.
We might have to give in. I don't know why she was dumb enough to tell me that, to be honest with you.
Oh, because you love it.
I love it. Anyway,
love it.
I don't think Tony Blair would approve. That man doesn't stop working. Here's the thing. If you've been the former Prime Minister and you had millions, I mean, the man is seriously rich. Yeah. I mean, his children, through his property empire, the businesses they've started and things, all credit to them. At least they're all working. They're not all layabouts, drug addicts or whatever. They're actually working. His family, they are very, very wealthy now. Would you, if you were Tony Blair, would you still be working?
No, absolutely not.
I'd be so on the beach.
So would I. I would be
so on the beach.
Whichever holiday home that I had in the place that I want to be.
This,
ignoring everything.
And this is why. And this is still claiming she's working. No, this is why these people become prime minister, because they are so driven.
Yes.
And they do go. So his Tony Blair Institute has been a big part. He's been making a load of money, but he also wants to basically drive the future. He's all about the digital ID cards, the AI. He'll take money from virtually any dictator. He doesn't care. But sometimes, frankly, he speaks a lot of sense. Sir Tony Blair, as he is now, has said that Keir Starmer, the current Prime Minister, is still there. Just in case you've woken up from a coma, he is still there. Keir Starmer has no coherent plan to fix Britain. He says that changing the party leader won't be enough to save Labour to win the next election. I want to know your reaction to that. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk and your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged of the national rate and text cost altogether now. One standard network rate message. You never join in, Claire. Let's just go through. I won't read the whole thing out to you, but genuinely, this is a really interesting piece. Basically, he's saying it would be dangerous for the Labour Party to lurch to the left. He's perfectly nice about Andy Burnham and about West Streeting, the likely candidates. But he said that basically changing leader won't save the party. He says the government's principal problem isn't Keir's personality or a failure to communicate our achievements or a need to assert more strongly Labour's values. Tony Blair says it is because we don't have a worked out, coherent plan for the country in a fast changing world and are in the wrong political position from which we can devise one and win a second term. He says the government is governing from an essentially traditional Labour soft left position, parked firmly in the party's comfort zone. He said that none of the would-be leaders appear to have a better plan for Britain. He says whether there's a leadership change or not is irrelevant if it doesn't start with a policy debate. Trying to force out the Prime Minister before we know what policy direction we're bringing in is not a serious way of conducting ourselves. Now, these are really, really firm words. He's saying, you know, the comfort zone that Labour like of high taxes and red tape, he says that's crippling growth. He says we need to be able to tackle the ballooning welfare bill and net zero, get cheaper energy, go forward in AI, staying close to America as our biggest ally, knowing where we are in the world. I mean, he needs to stop the boats. I mean, the one thing he only vaguely mentions it doesn't really go into is the fact that, I mean, small point worth making, mass immigration, that was the policy that he brought in. And it is interesting, I think, that you've got the likes of Liz Truss. I mean, she's pointed out today, the Blair-Brown era was responsible for the Bank of England Act, making it independent, Human Rights Act, Constitutional Reform Act, Equality Act, Climate Change Act, and more. She says power was taken from the elected, given to progressive bureaucrats and judges. That's why Britain is an ungovernable mess. I mean, he's got a point. She's also got a point, though, hasn't she?
But isn't it so much easier when you're on the outside to look at what's going on? Because you are so far removed from it at that point. You have no skin in the game.
Not worried about getting elected.
Precisely. And I think that's the problem. And politicians now are only ever working in 5-year terms. They are so scared.
I don't even think they think that ahead.
Oh, it probably
I think it's 24 hours. Yeah.
But they are so scared of making those changes because they think, how is that going to affect? And there's one thing that Blair says in his piece about everything moved to the right in the 2024 elections. So why were Labour saying this means we need to go further left because that's what the public want? He said you can't sort of square that away. And I thought this is the problem of the Labour Party. It's trying to go back to something that it isn't. Yeah. And it's not what.
But it's not tackling any of the real problems. And again, your failure to tackle absolute unwillingness and inability to tackle welfare dependency. You're not going to tackle the jobs crisis. You're not going to be able to tackle again, not going to be able to tackle jobs crisis if you haven't got cheap energy, so businesses can afford to run and putting prices up and charge national insurance and minimum wage and everything up for businesses is not going to work. Now, a lot of people say, look, he just represents money now. What does he care? What does he know? You know what? The guy won 3 elections. Yeah, he won 3 elections because he was so unpopular after the Iraq War. He won 3 elections, guys. I mean, I really find it quite bizarre. People don't remember this. No. He's a very clever guy. He's a thinker. He understands his stuff. I mean, I really struggle to disagree with very few words in this essay.
I was looking for something that I could point at and say, see, this is why you're wrong. And it wasn't coming.
It's the omissions. I mean, the things he's not accepting. And again, there is an issue where, you should get rid of the illegal migrants. Well, you should tackle that issue. Well, yeah, but you can't do that, as Liz Truss points out, because you brought in these mad, human rights and things. But again, none of that is insoluble. I mean, an awful lot of people in government, and your lot were like this for 14 years, like, look, this is just where it is. What can we do? No, you are elected to change laws if you need to change laws. And certainly that's what people would expect if, say, we had reform or Tory coalition at the next election. There would be an expectation that there is a massive change to laws to enable governments to get on and do the stuff they need to do.
And it's so much easier to point the finger at other people and say, but it's their policies that have made this really difficult. What are we going to do about it? Actually changing the policies is the really tricky bit, because you need to understand what it is you want to do in the first place.
And that's the thing about people. Again, we the reason why we don't know what Keir Starmer stands for, the reason why we don't really know what Andy Burnham stands for, is because they don't know either.
Precisely.
And that is one of the key things. And it's interesting, he was specifically critical of Andy Burnham, saying, in that PR video he did, his collection video for Makerfield, saying, but we, the last 40 years have been, terrible government. But he was a government minister.
Yes,
he was Secretary of State for Culture and for Health, and a minister and certainly an MP for an awful lot of that time in a Labour government. And as Tony Blair was saying, does he really mean that there was nothing good in Thatcher, nothing good in the Tony Blair and Gordon Brown governments? I mean, he's basically dissing everything that everyone else has done.
And that's the thing. So Tony Blair, this sort of new way of putting something is very similar to the third way that he brought out when he was back in power, and it's cherry picking the best bits of the left and the right and bringing them together and see how you can make it work, which at the time I disagreed with fundamentally, until I then looked at it a little bit harder and went, actually, he's got a point.
I mean,
there are good things.
I was a big fan of his in '97, like a lot of people, and then I opposed to tuition fees and also taking, that basically the banning on cigarette advertising, but not for after Bernie Ecclestone gave £1 million for motor racing. I'm like, no, this is corruption on a grand scale. No, and I won't have it. I'm zero tolerance on this stuff. It leaves me very few people to vote for, I have to say. But I do think they need to get that message. It just got worse and worse and worse. And again, the mass uncontrolled immigration, I think we are going to be you can change your energy policy. When you've had mass uncontrolled immigration, you've had 10 million people come to the country. Most of them you can't remove. You have changed your country irrevocably, and I think he did that deliberately. And so I think that is for me, not the Iraq War. That is for me is what is unforgivable. But it is interesting. I mean, net zero again. He's changed his tune on net zero because he like a load of people who are now saying, oh, we need to drop net zero policies and focus on on the cost of living and energy prices. Oh, no, they were all the people who were pushing this because it was fashionable to do so, and everyone thought you were a good person. And there were also sort of people who were criticising people like me, going, this is all a scam and it's madness and we can't do it, it's unachievable, unaffordable and undesirable. They were criticising people like me for being a climate denier. No, I'm just not a fact denier. I always said net zero never survives once it's actually had contact with reality. Well, here we are, folks. Reality has hit and it doesn't survive.
And that's
unless you're a Miliband.
And that's what makes me really cross. There is a whole bunch of us who knew that it was going to be rubbish all the way through. We didn't sort of get onto that trend of saying, windmills are going to save the economy.
I mean, Donald Trump's been right about that all along.
Absolutely. And when
he says it's a scam, it is literally a scam.
Absolutely.
The money making that's been going on.
I know, and then I get called a climate denier, and I want the planet to burn.
I've never denied the climate.
Why?
I've never denied the climate. The only good thing is there are still people who think that the world is about to die and they shouldn't have children as a result. And this is just Darwin in action, because we are basically weeding out some really thick genes at this point. We really are. They don't want the hysterics to breed. They just create more hysterical children. Yes, that was eugenics, in case you were wondering. But someone's going to complain, for the love of God. Right. I mean, talking of the net zero, of course, we were just talking before the top of the hour about our energy bills going up, £221 on average a year from July. But that's not the last we've heard of it. Bearing in mind, by the way, do you remember we were going to have 300 quid off? Our energy bills going to be 300 quid off. They're going to be cheaper. Well, they're not. They're not. They give with one hand, they take with the other. This is the result of the Iran conflict, but it's also the result of the fact that we are dependent on imported energy because there are no new licences for oil and gas drilling, no fracking licences in this country. We don't build nuclear power stations. We've got no gas storage. We don't even store jet aviation fuel. Our energy policy it's so beyond bad. It's laughable. It's almost like Xi Jinping. The Ayatollah in Iran and Vladimir Putin are running our energy policy because it's so detrimental to our economy, our defences and everything else. It's mind-blowing.
And those three individuals are not sort of sitting there thinking, what are we going to do for money for our country? Because they are rolling in it, and we're the ones who are suffering. But also, most people's bills were going up prior to the Iran conflict. So you can't just pin it all on that. We have had such an abysmal energy policy, and my party has its part to play in this
hugely.
As well, because
Boris Johnson,
absolutely leaning towards net zero and thinking everything was going to be tremendous if you just shoved up some solar panels. Well, no, it doesn't work like that if you don't have infrastructure, and this is what irritates
So
me
even if you have the
every single
infrastructure, it doesn't work like that. That's the basic problem.
But you
it
can
doesn't.
have renewable sources of energy if you invest in things like storage systems, which then nobody wants. Nobody wants.
Which, by the way, costs too much.
Exactly. So what are you going to do? And if you want
it's unforgivable. Your party is just as bad.
And I'm not blind to that, and I disagree.
And you have been speaking out on it. You have absolutely. I mean, Ian Doug Smith, who was on earlier, has always been saying on that one. What is going on the right of this country in terms of politics? So, because we've seen, haven't we, Nigel Farage in every political party he has created, or been a big part of. I mean, he didn't create UKIP, but he was, the UKIP, and then you've got Rebecca's party, now the Reform Party. I mean, him returning to the leadership of the Reform Party in 2024, I mean, within a few months, achieving an extraordinary result at the last general election may well have helped contribute, your lot being out of power, the Tories, Labour getting in on only 33 and a bit percent, because the people either didn't vote Tory or they voted Reform, and lots of seats. That right-wing vote was split. We are now seeing in the Makerfield by-election the right-wing vote being split, not just between Reform and the Tories way far back on this, on polling. And again, we've only had one poll. We spoke to Sir John Curtis, the doyen of polling and analysis yesterday, and he was saying, look, we've got one poll, and it's early days. And again, we must remember, most people in Makerfield won't even know there's a by-election on. They're getting on with their normal daily lives. They're busy just having a normal life, but working from home in the sunshine. But now we've got Restore. Now, Rupert Lowe left the Reform Party, big fallout. A lot of people do have a big fallout with Nigel Farage and his party. They claim that, the polls showed they had 7%, which would be enough to basically give Andy Burnham the win over the Reform candidate from 43% to 40%. And Restore are claiming actually they're doing so well in the seat, they may be vying with Reform. Is this all just about male egos? And frankly, and this is a technical term, a lot of big male egos, a lot of slapping willies on tables. That's how I view it, I'm afraid. Just basically, look at me, the big arm. It's all about their egos. It's all about them, having, wanting to prove how important they are, basically believing their own publicity, particularly on social media, and not actually doing what a lot of people may argue, and a lot of my audience, I think, would think was the right thing for the country.
Yeah, I think there's an awful lot of it is two enormous egos going up against each other, because you can believe your own publicity and you can say that the other person is worse than you are. You can also go out there and say our polling returns say. Now, I've been out delivering, I've been out knocking on doors. You can have your canvass returns and they can pretty much point to whatever it is you want them to point to because of the area that
depending
you are in at the time.
Knocked on doors.
Absolutely. You could have done one road, you could have done 4 houses. You can still make your
the people who open the door. But I mean, it is likely. I mean, Makerfield is a seat in the Manchester area where they voted. 2/3 voted Leave in 2016. It's the biggest indicator of being likelihood to vote for Reform, and they returned all entirely in the wards that voted entirely Reform candidates in the last local elections. Reform should be walking this. This is not the ideal seat for Andy Burnham to try and leave the Manchester mayoralty and go and become an MP and then vie for the leadership of the Labour Party and indeed to get into number 10. This wouldn't have been in his top 20 choices of seats to fight in on that basis. But he could now do it because Restore are putting a candidate up who can vie with the Reform candidate for those votes on the right. But should Restore, should the Conservatives stand up? Should in any seat when there's a choice between the left and the right, should the right say we will coalesce around whoever's got the biggest polling?
No, because that's not how democracy works, and people should be entitled to choose from the candidates that they have available to them. And it should be
voters do that then, even if the candidates don't?
What should voters sort of have the choice and say?
Should someone who's a die-hard Conservative voter or whoever it is say, in this seat, Conservatives don't stand a chance. My vote is literally a wasted vote. Do I have a preference between the top 2 candidates in the polling? Which one do I want the least? Which one do I want the most? However they choose to vote, should they do that?
I think that most people probably do have those conversations, and that is entirely up to them to do so. But what you don't want to see are 2 parties ripping chunks out of each other on personality points.
Well, there's a lot of
rather than what is going to be good for the area of whichever by-election it is. What are the major issues and how are we going to address them as a party?
I mean, it is extraordinary how much the attacks on the Reform candidate. I'll read out the names of all the candidates by the Reform UK candidate, Robert Kenyon, about every single post he's ever written on social media. I'm not saying the man makes good decisions, but I'm sorry. I'm speaking as a woman, given that it's all very sexist, it's all very sexual. I mean, it just made me laugh. I've got to be honest with you. And I do think Carol Vorderman getting upset, well, pretending to get upset about men talking about her in a sexual way when half the stuff she puts on social media is basically her bum gyrating in the gym. Yeah. I mean, sweetheart, come on, have some self-respect. I've got very little time for it. Not that these comments were particularly pleasant, but I think it's conversations people have down the pub. A lot of blokes do have.
But they're on
social
public
media
space.
I think a lot of people.
Have to be careful.
Yeah, I think a lot. I think, look, I've got, more than 500,000 followers on X. I know every post I wrote, even a reply to someone, is going to be seen publicly. But most people, if you've got, 80 followers and it's just your mates, your colleagues, and you're replying to them, you don't think of it as a public space. I mean, learn your lesson. Do we want people who are whiter than white? Do we want normal people to run for office? But only thing is, interesting today, Reform UK's candidate there, he apparently said Russia was within their rights to invade Crimea in 2014. I've got more of a problem with that. He said the annexation of Crimea was democracy in action in an online forum. And he says the hypocrisy of the West regarding Ukraine in the sin bin, one forum member wrote. The people of the Crimea want to be in Russia. For me, that's democracy in action. And he replied, I agree totally. Russia are well within their rights to do what they've done, as we did with the Falklands. However, will Latvia be next? Not sure I agree with this foreign policy, but there we are. But then we've got this, restore... facing claims of anti-Semitism among high-profile supporters. The far-right activist Steve Laws talking about, basically repatriating anyone who's not, ethnically white, including Jews who called foreign. He said that, Hitler's misunderstood. I mean, questioning the number of people who actually died in the Holocaust. Now, you're into that sort of territory. You are into nasty, racist conspiracy theory territory. Yes. Got no time for it. Those people, you don't want these people anywhere near your party. But we are in a... I don't know. We're a lot of people might support, this party or that party or something like that, but they are scared of people who are, should we say, far too close to some really scary racist people on the right.
And that's why we need to have much more scrutiny over these individuals. Yeah. And that's why candidates need to be able to stand up and defend comments that they've made. Yeah. And party leaders need to stand up and comment upon the supporters that they have around them as well. Now, if you are a leader of a party, people should coalesce around that. But you should be able to call out bad behaviour and deal with it. And that's not what people are doing at the moment.
But I think you should be able to say, well, actually, I shouldn't have written that. It's inappropriate. It's a public forum. You should. But I don't think a lot of people do actually hold that against people.
No, but you need to be able to explain yourself and you don't hide away from it.
What did you want to do to Carol Vorderman's bottom?
Exactly.
I mean, you should be able to...
Explain that.
Sorry, but it is very worrying. I'm going to read out the list of the candidates now, so make yourself a cup of tea while I do this. We've got the final list of candidates. Of course, we mentioned a couple of those. So, the full list of candidates for the Makerfield by-election: Jake Austin, Liberal Democrats; Count Binface Party; Andy Burnham, the Labour Party; Dan Clark, the Libertarian Party; John Dyer, the Independent; Ed Gemmell, Climate Party; Paul Gould, Independent; Alan Howling, Lord Hope, the official Monster Raving Looney Party; Robert Kenyon from Reform UK; Robert Pownell, Protect the Wild; Rebecca Shepherd, Restore Britain; Sarah Wakefield, Green Party; Peter Ward, Rejoin EU; Michael Winstanley, the Conservative Party. I have to say, you always know it's a proper by-election when Count Binface is standing. I've always thought of the greatest thing, a democratic moment, is when you had Theresa May standing next to Count Binface at one of the general
British
elections.
Politics, that is absolute finest.
You try and explain that to anyone in any other country, they don't get it. This is, people talk about what is British culture. There you go. Yes. There you go. That's British culture. People taking the mick out of a prime minister at her own general election. Let's also talk, can we briefly, just about Nicola Sturgeon's motorhome. Her husband's motorhome, bought 125 grand. Witnesses, local people have cast doubt on the fact that she claims nothing about all of these goods that were bought with 400 grand's worth of embezzled S&P funds by her husband, Peter Murrell, who's pleaded guilty. She said she wasn't even aware of this 125-grand motorhome, which was parked for 2 years on her mother-in-law's drive. Was totally unaware of it. Apparently bought by S&P so they could campaign during lockdown without staying in hotels. They could beat the COVID rules that way, blah, blah, blah. But she was totally unaware of it. But the witnesses have said, well, that doesn't make sense because she was, she was in that area. She was out, with her mother-in-law. And what are the odds? Yeah. What are the odds that she didn't at any point go to her mother-in-law's home and see this thing that was parked there every day for 2 years?
I mean, none. The whole list of this is like the sort of generation game conveyor belt.
Everyone said, yeah.
7 kettles. I mean, I think that was the one.
It's the 4 coffee machines.
4 coffee machines.
9 grand.
I know, and that's ridiculous.
The salt and pepper shakers. Yeah.
But who
do you think she knew or not? I find it inconceivable.
Would you not notice if you go round to someone's house that they have an enormous motorhome on their driveway? And you just go,
where did you buy
that? Where did you get it from?
Mrs. Murrell, yeah. But my favourite comment on social media about that was, God, it'd been great if you got Peter Murrell, the Sturgeon's now ex, if you got Peter Murrell in the Office Secret Santa, you get something great. There's also a great little trick. Basically, check how many followers you've got on social media, whether it's 80 or 5,000, and put a pound sign in front of that. And then the last thing you touched in your kitchen, that's your Peter Murrell swag.
Love it.
So if the last you touch, so if you've got 5,000, you've got a £5,000 toaster.
Amazing.
So you just touched the bread. You've got a £300 bread knife. Just do it. And if you're at home, working, I would go down. Message me. I want to know what is your Peter Murrell swag. Anyway, 11. She can't wait to go and do that now. 11:28 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to get to your calls. 0344 499 1000. Calling in about the Tony Blair and what he had to say. Your energy bills going up. You name it. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
If your other half came home with £125,000 worth of motorhome, wouldn't you go, darling, where did you get that from? Yeah. Have that turned up on the driveway? Where did you get the motorhome from? It's a very expensive motorhome. £81,000 Jaguar, Volkswagen Golf, partly funded with stolen cash, luxury watches over 9,000 quid, Mont Blanc pens, a £3,232 coffee machine. What was the man doing?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 11:30 is the time. I'm going to get straight to your calls. 0244 499 1000. What do you make of what Tony Blair's had to say? That Keir Starmer's got no coherent plan to fix Britain. Changing leader won't save the Labour Party. I mean, tell us something we don't know, Tony. Tom is in Perthshire and wants to have his say. Hello, Tom. What do you reckon?
Good morning, Julia.
Good morning.
It is my humble opinion that Mr. Blair is, I think, the worst Prime Minister we have ever had, bar none. And God knows we've had some absolute howlers of late.
You think he's worse than Gordon Brown?
Well, hang on. So they say, judge a person by his actions, not his words.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go back and just go through a few of Tony Blair's actions, if I may. So the globalist to end them all, right? He wanted Britain to be at the heart of Europe, including the euro. He threw open the borders with no idea the consequences that would have, which were catastrophic for working people. He did the devolution deal within Britain, which politically is the equivalent of saying you can be a little bit pregnant, you know, absolute madness, and has caused so much unhappiness and still does so. He, everybody's spoken about, he presided over the Iraq war thing, and my concern on that was not, you know, Prime Ministers make mistakes. The bit that bothered me with it was when David Kelly was suicided by accident, right? And, you know, he expanded higher education massively by saying to people they would get great jobs and all they got was huge debts. And he has felt it acceptable to intervene on the actions of every Prime Minister since him. And that's totally against every convention. So I look at everything he says now in that context. He was a disaster as Prime Minister. He may well have ended, ultimately he may be responsible for ending the unity of the United Kingdom. And I will never, never forgive him for that.
Well, I mean, that is an extraordinary analysis. That is, do you know what? I mean, I'm finding myself nodding along to a lot of that. Actually, some of the really big picture stuff he did, he set in train, didn't he? He just sort of, you know, put a chink in the dam, and then the deluge happened after him. But actually, he's the one who set it in train. Tom, fantastic call, fantastic analysis. Thank you very much indeed. Let's go to Marion, who is in Norfolk. And Marion, you want to talk about the joy and pleasure of your energy bill going up?
Oh, yes, indeed. Good morning.
Good morning.
No one's talking very much that I've heard about the standing charges on your bills.
Yeah.
I'm just going to give you a quick example of what's going on with that. My last bill for April was £77, right? The standing charges for both electricity and gas were £28. So if you do the arithmetic, math, whatever you want to call it, that's over 36% of that bill was on top of. And then, of course, you've got VAT, which is also applied to the standing charge.
Yeah.
And they're talking about, oh, it's going down, it's going up, it's going down. My standing charge went up for electricity from March. The gas went down. So what they're doing is they're just juggling it around.
But you're always paying more.
Down prices.
But I don't have an issue. I mean, there has to be a certain amount, you know, for you to be connected to the system, and you know they've got to have some sort of, you know, guaranteed income for, you know, having that, you know, all the pipes and the wiring, they've got to have that. So I suppose it's the percentage of it. But my issue is all the extra charges, all the extra surcharges and things which are basically around funding net zero madness that puts up the price and then putting VAT on the top of it. I mean, they're giving with one hand and taking away with the other, aren't they?
Yeah, and Julia, I live in a small one-bedroom flat, so I'm quite frugal with my heating. I'd rather put on a sweater than just turn the heat up. Yeah. But I can't imagine what it's like for larger houses and homes with big families to keep warm. It's a nightmare.
Or elderly and disabled who just absolutely need it. And again, I mean, that energy bills, that's going up in July. People say, but if you're paying on direct debit, you're paying sort of usually roughly the same amount every month. So people are going to feel that, and it's definitely going to go up again in the autumn. There's no expectation that the impact the Iran conflict isn't going to keep on impacting us there. Marion, appreciate your call. Very good point. Thank you very much. Take a quick break now. Up next, going to be talking about this, what on earth is going on between Reform and Restore. We'll talk to Philip Kisley. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning once again. This is Talk. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's talk right now to my next guest. He's a senior fellow at the New Culture Forum. Philip Kisley, a very good morning to you.
And good morning to you,
Thank
Julia.
Thank you for joining us. I want to talk to you about what's going on the right of politics in this country at the moment. I do want to ask you about Tony Blair and his delivery of a 5,700-word essay basically saying Keir Starmer's got no coherent plan to fix Britain, they'd come into power without a plan, and that changing the leader won't be enough to save Labour because the problem isn't the messenger or the message, it is basically the policies. Do you think he's right?
Well, it's bizarre that I'm agreeing with Tony Blair because I would never agree with him on anything. But yes, in this instance, I do think he's right. I mean, the last thing anybody needs is a 5,600-word essay from Tony Blair. But I think in this instance, he's right. But let's just be clear about where all of these problems come from. It isn't just Labour policy. It isn't about a manifesto. It isn't about what's going on with this government just. It's about what's happened since 1997. And as your previous caller, I thought it was a really excellent call.
Absolutely, yeah.
As he kind of alluded to, all of the problems we have now, Julia, which are mass immigration, Islamism and identity politics, stem from the Blair administration. Yeah. That's that whole idea of opening up the borders, flooding people, all of that kind of thing. That ideology comes from Tony Blair. Also focusing very definitely the economy on things like the creative industries, for example, in the long term was catastrophic for us. So there are lots and lots of problems. So it's very rich that we have Tony Blair, the architect of all this chaos, saying we're in chaos. But hey, he's a politician. He's Tony Blair.
It's what he'd do.
Kind of
but it is fascinating again. And he was someone again who's pushing, since being an officer, the net zero stuff, and now he's opposed to it. With his AI funder for his institute. He was somebody who's now saying, you need to deal with the immigration issue and the small boats and things. But again, human rights. Liz Truss pointed out earlier today, he brought in the Human Rights Act. All these things that always again, these things have been totally misinterpreted, I would say, very wrongly by lawyers and by judges, but allowing people to basically appeal and get to stay here. And again, as our caller Tom pointed out, he just sort of started these things. And now we're living with the full impact of what he did. Do you think he in any way has seen the error of his ways?
No, I don't think he has, because I don't think people like that do think in that self-reflective kind of way. I really don't think he does. I think he's an opportunist, and I think he just looks at what's happening and likes to stick his oar in, basically. I mean, at least he is responding to empirical evidence. He is looking.
That's a good sign.
It is a good sign, but you know what? It's down to him. He should have responded to empirical evidence 20, 30 years ago, when it was very obvious to people like you, people like me, the various think tanks in Westminster, that opening the borders, flooding the country with immigrants was only going to...
Yeah, and I'm not even saying it. With hindsight, I was political
editor.
Exactly. I was political editor of the Sunday Express in 2001, and I was absolutely writing about things like the warnings from Migration Watch that it's going to be in the hundreds of thousands of arrivals from Eastern Europe, not the 13,000 predicted by the Home Office. And what a surprise! But again, I was just a racist bigot then, apparently, Philip, as we all are now for questioning it. By the way, we've had lovely weather. Lots of people enjoying the weather. Perhaps a little bit happier today when it's cooled down quite a bit by a few degrees, a bit more bearable. But what a surprise for me if we get nice weather now. We had more migrant arrivals, the illegal migrant kind. 1,000 plus arrived over the bank holiday weekend. I don't think anyone's surprised by that. But we've got an ongoing issue in terms of how we remove people, whether they've arrived legally or illegally. Now, there are battles between all the different parties. There are battles within parties and battles between the left and the right. But let's start with the battle within one party, Reform's Party. Two of the most senior figures, Zia Youssef, who is the Home Affairs spokesman, and Robert Jenrick, now the Treasury spokesman for that party, they're in a battle, very public spat. Robert Jenrick said at the weekend that foreign nationals would not exclusively, in his words, face deportation if they lived in council accommodation. This is all about campaigning around the idea that basically, if you're in if you're in a council property, you know, you're needing to be subsidised for your home. By definition, you're not a net benefit to the economy. He was asked whether a foreign-born resident on Sky News who lived in social housing would be deported just because they lived in social housing. And he said, well, not exclusively because of that. He said there are other criteria. Are they working? Well, how many hours are they working? What are they earning? Etc., etc. Now, in a public tweet, we had Zia Youssef say, well, actually, as the person responsible for our deportation plan, I want to ensure people know where we stand. If a foreign national, he says, lives in social housing at taxpayer expense, they automatically fail our economic test and will be deported. Now, quite aside from the exposed, you know, the open row, are we really seriously expecting the Reform Party, with plans to deport 600,000 illegal migrants, people who've arrived illegally or have stayed on illegally, also to deport legal migrants who have possibly even been working and who've been entitled to indefinite leave to remain?
Well, it's a really difficult one, but let's just take it one step at a time. And I think the first issue here is governance and discipline and management within the party. Okay, I think that's massively important, and I think guys, look, have your disagreements, have your spats, work things out in private. Don't do it in public. And for God's sake, don't do it on X, Twitter. Okay. So I think that's one thing. I think they have to get this immigration policy absolutely right. And I think it needs to be very clearly communicated in the simplest terms possible. As we've been looking at all of this confusion around this, I was thinking about what was really good for the Tories in the 2019 election, and it was get Brexit done, wasn't it?
Simple message.
Words, very simple. Repeat that message. We are in a situation now where the British public, quite rightly, are extremely worried about immigration, mass immigration, and illegal immigration. That is the number one issue. Okay, so they need to get their message correct. Now, deport all illegals. I think we're all absolutely on message for all of that kind of stuff.
Well, I mean, I think the sane people are. I'm flabbergasted there are people who don't think we should deport people who are here illegally. I mean, that blows my mind. But there are people who think that.
Oh yeah, but there always will be people who think stupid things. That's the nature. That's the nature of living in an open society. But the vast majority of British people, we know what they think because you can just go on poll check and find out. So reform are absolutely okay chiming with British sentiment and British ideas. So that is great. That further question of whether we should deport absolutely everyone who isn't paying their way, my God, that's a vexed question, and that's going to really split people because there are. I mean, you know, I'm fairly hard line on these things, but there are grey areas that we do need to think about and make allowance.
And people will be talking about at that point. You're talking about people's neighbours. You're talking about your kids and their friends, school friends. You know, and living in the next street. That's when people are going to start going, oh, I don't think so. Isn't a more sensible view is that you're not deporting those people, but, you know, you're saying, OK, but you're no longer entitled. We're going to give you notice, but you're no longer entitled to any financial help from the British taxpayer. And if you can support yourself, fine, and you're going to contribute, fine. But otherwise, making life, let's face it, a bit difficult for people who are not contributing. But reality check. They're not going to be able to deport all of the illegal immigrants, let alone people who are here legally, who have done everything. They've played by the rules. Now, we may disagree. I don't think you should be entitled to social housing if you come here, you know, from another country. But if they've played by the rules, they've done nothing illegal, I think a lot of people would say, well, you can't be going deporting people who've done nothing wrong.
Yeah, I think what we need to be able to do is have a sensible and worthwhile discussion about these things. Now, the problem we have as a society is that we've only just been allowed to start doing this.
Very good point, yeah.
If you, even 2 years ago, if you were saying, oh, well, we need to deport illegals, we need to do this, well, you would be branded a racist immediately.
Yeah.
So we've got a long way to go yet to say, look, let's be honest with this. Let's put our fears on the the table, but let's also be humane about it as well and think about communities and neighborhoods and people and families. But ultimately, let's think about the good of society and the good of this country and where we are going, bearing in mind the income tax, revenue doesn't go anywhere near now meeting welfare. So we have to deal with that. We have to stop being a welfare nation. We have to put going to work first. We have to, control the borders, stop mass immigration. It's down to reform, and it's down to Zia and Robert to get together and come up with a very clear set of policies which say we will do this, and this. And sorry, the final point, Julia, is it chimes with British ideas and where the British public are right at this moment. That's the key thing.
That's absolutely crucial. But also crucially, it needs to be stuff you can actually do.
Precise.
And that's the difference. Just very briefly, if you would, we've got battles between Restore, ongoing massive egos, and between Restore and Reform, and obviously is playing out a lot in the Makerfield by-election. What do you make of that, briefly?
Well, it's such a shame that this is happening because, we can see on the horizon a Reform government, can't we? But if Restore come in with whatever percentage they're going to take away from Reform, we have potentially the worst of all possible worlds, which is some ghastly alliance between Labour, Green, and very worryingly, a set of independents which are fundamentally Islamist. So that's what we're looking at. I don't think this question really is about democracy it's actually about common sense, Julia, and it's about what we want in the medium term. What do we want in the medium term? We want a government that's going to reverse all of the nonsense. We want a government
it may not be the perfect government.
Set of ideas.
It may not be every single policy you want, but those are the choices. Philip, I wish we had longer. Always so good to talk to you. Thank you so much. We need to get you to bang some people's heads together. Senior fellow at the New Culture Forum, Claire Pissell. It's almost like the Conservatives are being left out of that debate right now.
And I don't think it's a bad thing for the Conservatives to be left out of it. And I think Kemi is right to hold her counsel and not get involved in someone else's spat and just concentrate on the party and the candidate that we have there.
Yeah, well, there we are. I did read out all the candidates a few moments ago. I'm not reading them out again. I know. There's a load of them. And 11:49 is time. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to talk about what on earth is going on in the Strait of Hormuz and the Iran conflict. Of course, that is one of the main reasons why we are seeing our energy bills going up as of July by about 221 quid. Is there any sign of that strait being reopened, the oil and the gas getting out, and things improving? We'll talk about that up next. This is Talk.
If your other half came home with £125,000 worth of motorhome, wouldn't you go, darling, where did you get that from? Yeah. Have that turned up on the driveway? Where did you get the motorhome from? It's a very expensive motorhome. £81,000 Jaguar, Volkswagen Golf, partly funded with stolen cash, luxury watches over 9,000 quid, Mont Blanc pens, a £3,232 coffee machine. What was the man doing?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 11:51 is the time. Well, let's talk about the Iran conflict, which is still just sort of hovering in the background of everything we do, particularly with our economy, particularly as we've seen that Ofgem price rise, 221 quid extra. Your bills are going to cost you to heat and light your home over the next, well, from July, but on average over the year, largely, we're told, thanks to the Iran conflict. And, of course, insane net zero policies, which mean we are uniquely hard hit by the increase in oil and gas prices on the global markets. But what is going on in terms of actually, well, ending that conflict and getting that strait reopened? Elliot Wilson is a senior fellow for the national security at the Coalition for Global Prosperity and joins us right now. Elliot, thank you so much for your time.
No problem. Good morning, Julia.
We've had various different statements. I mean, again, every time I start this topic, it's like, oh, there's been another message from Donald Trump, another message from the Iranians. But essentially, the Iranians have issued an ultimatum to Trump saying Tehran will only sign a peace agreement if the US releases $24 billion worth of frozen assets. There's been lots of negotiation about opening the Strait of Hormuz, giving up their enriched uranium. But, you know, they want this money. But what do we think they're going to spend that money on when they get it, if they get it?
Well, that's the thing. And I think there's also a kind of presentational problem for President Trump that if this war, which we were told was, a massive success, ends up with him effectively giving the Islamic Republic of Iran $24 billion, the optics aren't great around that. No. It's very difficult to see where we're going, partly because I think we set out with such a vague set of plans. Donald Trump talked about various war aims almost in the same sentence, and some of them have been, some of them massively haven't. So it's trying to peer into his mind and seeing what he will regard as an acceptable win, and what he will regard as his red line.
Well, indeed, we've got both sides are going to want to play this as a win and not back down. But it does seem so much of the debate has now been about opening the Strait of Hormuz. So if we get the Strait of Hormuz opened and ships can pass safely without paying a toll to Iran, so we've got free passage on our waters. But I mean, that would just be getting us back to the situation before the war. Has anything actually been achieved? I mean, I'm all in favour of the West taking on the mullahs and making sure they are not a threat. They're undoubtedly trying to get nuclear weapons. That must be prevented, I would say, genuinely at all costs, in my personal opinion. We're not even willing to take an economic cost, let alone losing the lives of servicemen and women to do that. Has Donald Trump achieved any of his war aims?
It's difficult to say. It may well be that he has set back their nuclear capacity or their potential for a nuclear capacity by a few years. But then we were told last summer that it had been obliterated anyway. So it's difficult to work out where that is. I mean, I agree with you. I have no fundamental problem with us collectively taking military action under certain circumstances to clip the wings of Iran. Iran is a dangerous theocracy which murders its own people. I think the problem is that Trump went into this assuming that it was a bit like Venezuela, which of course had been, from his point of view, a success. But although a lot of damage has been done to Iran, to Iran's military infrastructure, to its civilian infrastructure, it's still in the game. It still has some nuclear potential. And of course, it has now closed the Straits of Hormuz, and it seems to have mined the Strait of Hormuz as well. So it's not been an unalloyed success, certainly for Donald Trump. Benjamin Netanyahu may take a very different view. But I think it's about where this ends up from those two points of view. For Israel, this is an existential crisis and an existential conflict. For Donald Trump, it's not. But if we come away from this with the Iranians having proven that they can close the Strait of Hormuz, and perhaps extract tolls, then I think that's put the West in a very bad position. Yeah,
and indeed, again, leaving them in a stronger position. Again, they don't care about, the price of gas or food or the rampant inflation. I mean, runaway Zimbabwe levels of inflation in Iran. What do they care? They're not impacted by it. Meanwhile, in the background, of course, while we're dealing with Iran, well, not the conflict we've chosen, as the Prime Minister keeps pointing out, and dealing with threats from China as well, but because we've still got Russia as a major issue. And in a speech given by the GCHQ director, Anne Keyes-Butler, today, our largest spy agency, she's warning that the UK is at a moment of consequence as Russia is relentlessly targeting our critical infrastructure. Look, we've seen the jets, basically buzzing our jets in the Black Sea, and, just blatantly, openly, with embargo tankers, taking the tankers through, right past our beaches. It does seem to me that we're constantly being told by the experts, whether it's a former defence secretary or defence chief or someone like this, that we are basically, to all intents and purposes, in a grey war or warm war with Russia and others, and nothing ever seems to get done. I mean, is there any evidence that the government is taking this stuff seriously? Oh, have we lost?
There seems to be a real problem in terms of.
Sorry, I think we've got. Yeah, I think we've got your line. It's a bit scrambled, but we've got you back now. Sorry about that.
A real problem in terms of what the government says and what it does, and this is a problem that's persisted for the 2 years it's been in office. The Strategic Defence Review talked a lot about projecting military strength, and Keir Starmer has talked a lot about now having authorised.
Oh, Elliot, I'm so sorry. The line is completely scrambled. We're having a lot of problems. I'm wondering if it's heat-related with everybody today. I'm so sorry. We're going to have to leave it there. We didn't get to finish that point. A huge apology. Elliot Wilson from the Coalition for Global Prosperity. Claire Pearce, who's listening to that on it. I mean, we are. I mean, you come from a military family. Yeah. It is extraordinary how often people who definitely know their stuff. I think the boss of GCHQ knows us. We've got former bosses of MI6, MI5, former defence chiefs going, we are basically in a kind of a warm war with Russia, and China to a certain extent, and around the terror attacks. Can we please bump up our security, whether it's cyber, whether it's drones, whether it's full-on military hardware? And it doesn't seem to me that our politicians are listening.
They're not, because they don't understand where the war is coming from. They think of war as sort of almost
tanks rolling in.
Yeah, and tanks rolling in. But we've been had cyber attacks against us. We've had cable attacks against us, and we will continue to do so. And I'm sure that there are probably many more attacks that are stopped in the cyber market than we will ever get to hear.
Whenever I hear about a bank and their cyber go down, I'm like, yep, there you go. They're testing things. They've been mapping where all our electronic data comes through, and across the Atlantic and across the North Sea.
They know our infrastructure better than we do.
But this thing, I suppose people think, well, they're not going to roll the tanks and invade us. No, but it's about cutting us off and us not being able to act when they act elsewhere. I don't get why people don't get this. Why we're having a debate about how much more money and when we should start spending on defence. Treble it today. Yeah. Today. Buy stuff off the shelf. Today.
Yes, definitely. And people won't understand until it affects them.
And by the way, don't worry about your gas bill when there's something going on in Iran conflict. Worry about your bills if and when we actually go into a hot war. I think people are living with their heads in the sand on this one. I really, really do. I think those people might know what they're talking about. Coming up, we're going to be talking more about Tony Blair. Is he right in all his criticisms of Keir Starmer? That's up next. This is
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. It's 2 minutes past midday. Got a lot more to talk about on the show. And whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, thank you so much for joining me. Don't forget, if you missed anything from the show, go to my YouTube page, Julia Hartley-Brewer Show, hit subscribe, and you never have to miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, we're going to be discussing more about Tony Blair and his attack on Keir Starmer's record in office, saying he has no coherent plan to fix Britain, but also actually just planning to change the leader ain't gonna solve Labour's problems. I mean, he's right about all of that, isn't he? Plus, those 3 teenage boys who were spared jail after, well, 2 of them convicted of rape, one of them convicted of basically egging them on. He's on video. I mean, it's just utterly repulsive. 2 teenage girl victims, 2 months apart. Basically, those teenage boys will have their unduly lenient sentences reviewed. It's after a decision by Lord Homer, the Attorney General. But why on earth would they be sentenced to basically no time at all behind bars, just some community sentence work for not just one rape, 2 different rapes, 2 different numbers, multiple rapes even on those occasions? What on earth is going on in our judiciary? Plus, NASA has released details of robotic landers, hopping drones and vehicles it aims to send to the moon as part of American plans to build a lunar base there. You know me. Always for that stuff. Right now, I'd like to say that Claire Pistol still joins us. She's a former Conservative government advisor. Welcome to you, of course. And we're talking a lot about Tony Blair today. A lot of you having to say, I think it's safe to say you're not fans, are you? You're not fans of Tony Blair. Now, I was a fan in '97. Went off him after that. But it seems to me his analysis of what the hell's been going on in the Labour government and of the Labour woes right now in the polls is absolutely spot on. And Claire, you and I have been discussing this a little bit earlier. We're going to be talking to a former political editor of The Sun in just a moment. But he says that he said Keir Starmer had no coherent plan to fix Britain. He accused him of retreating into a left-wing comfort zone of high taxes and red tape, crippling growth, failing to tackle things like the ballooning welfare bill. He said it was dangerous for the party to lurch to the left in this 5,700-word essay. He says the government's principal problem isn't Keir's personality or a failure to communicate our achievements or a need to assert more strongly Labour's values. It is because we don't have a worked-out, coherent plan for the country in a fast-changing world and we're in the wrong political position from which we can devise one and win a second term. He says the government is governing from an essentially traditional Labour soft left position, parked firmly in the party's comfort zone. He says they need to tackle illegal migration, needs to drop the net zero stuff, get cheaper energy, embrace AI. You know, all of these welfare reforms are absolutely crucial. But he says, this is fascinating, whether there is a leadership challenge or not is irrelevant if it doesn't start with a policy debate. Trying to force the Prime Minister out before we know what policy direction we're bringing in is not a serious way of conducting ourselves. I mean, he criticised Wes Streeting, and even though he's a massive Remainer himself, that rejoining the EU isn't the answer to our problems, but neither is, and we've heard from Burnham, basically moving even further left on taxes, spending and welfare. He says the Labour Party is playing with fire, or more accurately with its future and that of the country. Now, I mean, you know, he's criticising the Prime Minister and all of the contenders for the, but that is a big fan of Angela Rayner. I mean, this is a damning intervention, isn't it?
It really is, and it's quite a substantial piece that he's put together, pointing out all of the weaknesses of the Labour government since he left. I would argue that a lot of these problems were caused by him when he was in, and one of your callers earlier, and this is what I'd actually forgotten, it was everybody needs to go to university to go and get a degree.
50%,
Whoa, I'd forgotten about that because, of course, he was the architect of everybody must go, and therefore it will all be better. And then we're seeing all of these young people unable to get a job.
And degrees worth nothing.
Degrees, absolutely worth nothing at all. And therefore we as a country...
Honeyboy tuition fees.
Yeah, and we as a country haven't looked at apprenticeships as an option until only recently, which we should have done.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's one of the least of his bad things he did. I was a fan at the time.
Picking one out.
It's a long list. We've already got another hour.
Exactly.
Yeah. Let's talk with my next guest now. He's former political editor of The Sun. George Pascoe Watson joins us. A very, very good afternoon to you, George.
Julia, hi. Great to see you.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Now, you and I actually worked in the House of Commons around the same time from, not different papers, but sitting in the same, in the Commons office when Tony Blair was Prime Minister. He went on to become political editor. His analysis, lengthy, very, rip-roaring read, though. But I have to say, it's hard to disagree with any of his analysis of what is going wrong now. Is there anything in particular you think he got particularly right or particularly wrong?
It's a checklist of a real brilliant consultant's analysis of what's wrong with the patient. Welfare spending too high, defence spending too low, the overcommitment on some sort of fantastical belief that somehow rejoining the European Union is going to solve Britain's problems. I could go on. His analysis was absolutely spot on, and there's hardly a word that you would disagree with. And that's it's a real big reminder, actually, to a lot of people now, that it's been a very long time since we've had in this country a leader with a bang-on analysis, the clarity of thought, and also something which is worth pointing out, which is Tony Blair was saying, you don't have to be party political. In fact, being party political is the problem here. Nobody is able to capture what the problem is in this country right now and give the right solutions, because everybody is captured too much by political ideology.
And actually, it was interesting. Tim Shipman, who is now a political editor of The Spectator, wrote this morning going, there isn't actually anybody sensible and honest in any of the main political parties now, and I would include Reform there, who don't accept actually, you need to cap up welfare. One of the things he also said, the triple lock on pensions. Yeah, let's all be nice, but it's unaffordable. It's not doable. That the taxes are too high on people, too much welfare dependency, a lot of these things. There isn't anyone sane and honest who doesn't agree with a lot of that. But it's a very interesting point. Liz Truss, former Prime Minister herself, perhaps one could say not as successful a Prime Minister as Tony Blair, never actually won a general election, only lasted 49 days, not 10 years. But she said, the Blair-Brown era, if you look back, was responsible for the Bank of England Act, Human Rights Act, Constitutional Reform Act, again, the devolution, Equality Act, Climate Change Act, again, net zero we're still stuck with. Again, the inability to deport illegal migrants, a lot of this, the trans madness, power was taken, she says, from the elected and given to progressive bureaucrats and judges. That's why Britain is an ungovernable mess. And there is very, very fair point in all of that actually he might have been a good Prime Minister who was re-elected again and again, whether you agreed or disagreed. He was the preference for the majority of voters for three elections, but he kind of opened the door on things like mass migration, on net zero, on particularly with Gordon Brown, everyone on working tax credits and things, for mass welfare dependency, for the inability to deport anybody because we've got this mad Human Rights Act and the over-interpretation of it, I would say, is part of the problem. And as Claire was pointing out, the universities, 50% of people to university, it was just a cunning wheeze to hide the unemployment rates at the time and not preparing people for working life. That actually, a lot of the things that he did, we might not have felt the pain of them then, but we're definitely feeling the pain of them now.
What I would say about that is this. Blair himself this morning made it very, very clear that there's a whole bunch of policies which are attractive on the face of it and desirable when the times are good, when you can afford them. And what he also said this morning is we cannot afford them. And the reason for that is because there's no growth in our economy. Yeah. And the reason for that is back to governments creating the right environment for businesses to thrive. And that is the thing that Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, love them or loathe them, they did at least encourage an environment where businesses were encouraged to thrive. And they did. And the economy, therefore, could afford things. Now, what is also true is that opening up the laws to judicial interpretation has absolutely led to a bunch of the problems that we have now, because effectively judges are setting law in the UK on things like immigration and other matters, and that is definitely something that was on his watch. all prime ministers make big decisions. Some of them are going to be right, and some of them are going to be wrong, and that's one of the failings. But it was all about growth. He said we could afford it. We can't afford it now.
But he also, of course, I mean, he had a big majority, 179, actually, a bigger majority than Keir Starmer had in the 24 election. But he also inherited an economy in very good shape from John Major, from a lot of those reforms. I mean, he completely different economic legacy that he faced rather than Keir Starmer, and that's the key thing. But I was wondering, though, in terms of like the governance of the country, and as one of our callers pointed out earlier, starting the ball rolling on devolution and all the changes that's brought in, but also the sort of the idea, again, this very Europhile, ruled by bureaucrats and technocrats, and this is something a lot of the people like him who are staunch Remainers, although he's saying, going back to the EU is not the answer, especially. He's quite right. You couldn't negotiate from a position of weakness, but also ruled by the courts, ruled by judges, but also quangos. A lot of people would argue that even though the Tories were in power for 14 years, to all intents and purposes, the country's been run by sort of Tony Blair appointees and apparatchiks all that time.
Well, one of the ways you stay in power is to make sure that the fabric of the country, the decision makers all across the board, are in some way owe their loyalty to you as the Prime Minister. That's how you stay in power. It may be difficult for our audience to accept that, but that is skill politics. And perhaps one of the reasons why Tony Blair stayed in power. These were different times, Julia. We didn't have social media. We didn't have, even smartphones didn't come in until 2007. So it was much easier to govern with strength. You talked about his majority. That was a real majority where there was a real desire of the population to get behind Blair. We at The Sun, we backed Blair in 3 general elections for a reason, because there was real sense about what he was saying. He was the right sort of pair of hands, and he was sympathetic to our readers and your viewers today. And he knew what was the right thing for the country. That's a very different proposition today. Governing today with the speed of information, with the inability to control even your own MPs. Starmer's got this 170 basically majority in the Commons, which is a very, very, we joke about it. It was a loveless landslide that he had, because it was arithmetic that got him in such numbers. But he hasn't got a Commons majority that can get major laws through.
He can't get anything through.
Because his own MPs won't back him. So it's a very different scenario that Tony Blair finds himself in.
But it's interesting. I mean, but Tony Blair makes it very clear. He says, the government's principal problem isn't Keir's personality or a failure to communicate our achievements or a need to assert more strongly Labour's values. He says, you need a plan, you need policies. And the reality is most people don't really care who's running the country. A lot of people, most people couldn't name half the cabinet, or even 3 or 4 people in the cabinet. They don't care. They're getting on with their own lives, their own jobs, their families, doing the weekly shop, driving, they just want to be able to have a better life than their parents have and give their children a better life. And just frankly, as one of the things that Keir Starmer promised but is abjectly failing to do, have government tread more lightly on our lives. Just leave me alone. Get on with running my business, or get on with doing my job, running my family, living my own life. But actually, leadership does matter. Who the leader is and their personality does matter. I'm sure you remember as well as I do, year after year, there'd be these moments of crisis in Tony Blair's premiership. And again, the Iraq War, a lot of people brought up as a reason to really dislike him and judge him harshly. There'd be these moments where we'd be writing, and on the Sunday, I was on the Sunday Express, Tony Blair faces his toughest week yet, and pressure piled on. Will he get through PMQs? Will he get through party conference? And time after time, he could just do it. He could deliver. He had the force of personality. He had the intellect to do it. And we see time after time that Keir Starmer can't do that. He just does. Whatever it is, he ain't got it. Whatever the X factor is, he ain't got it. How much do you think, in the age, particularly of social media, 24-hour news, all these pressures, does having that, I suppose, X factor personality matter?
Well, the X factor is really, really important to get into power. We've seen people in the past get into power on the X factor, but then when they get into power, they're not very good at governing. So that's a watch out. It's really, really important that you have good people around you. So it wasn't just Blair on his own. Blair, and he talked about this morning, making sure that you have real talent in the building and in key positions running the government is vital. Because you can't do everything yourself, and to pretend you can is a falsehood. Being, photogenic, being enigmatic, being interesting is all very good and well. But in the end, you have to carry your political party, your Commons majority, with you, and you need to carry the business community with you. You need to carry, if you're the Labour Party, the trade union leaders with you. You actually have to have lots and lots of audiences who are sympathetic towards you or are prepared to go along with what you set out. Keir Starmer's problem is he didn't set out anything in the first place other than to say, I'm not everybody else.
I'm not the Tories.
Yeah, exactly. And that means that when you get in, somebody gives you the keys to the car and you say, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't even know where I'm going to go.
Yeah.
And then you are, all eyes are on you to try and make sure that you are going to do something interesting. And people have become very, very disillusioned with the fact that the government has gone not only in no direction, but it's been dragged to the left on energy, on taxation, and of course the business community is struggling. We see closures the whole time. Is this an interesting, attractive place to invest? That's the big question, and it isn't.
Yeah, it is interesting. I've always wondered, though, whether people will see someone as charismatic if they can get the job done. And it's interesting the contrast between Keir Starmer and Tony Blair in terms of their ability to have seriously good quality intellectual people in their cabinets, but also to have a team in number 10, whether you like them or loathe them. I mean, I've had my run-ins, as I'm sure you have with Alistair Campbell over the years, is that actually people who were there for the duration. He didn't go through a new chief of staff every 6 months, as Keir Starmer has, which perhaps suggests, if it was a business, you would go, hold on a minute, something's going wrong there. In terms of just the leadership, no one seriously thinks, I think, other than Keir Starmer, that he is going to still be leader of this of the Labour Party and Prime Minister in a few months' time. I think a lot of us are amazed he hasn't already set out a timetable for his departure. Is he just holding on in the hope that Andy Burnham doesn't get back into Parliament and he can't actually run for the leadership? Who knows? But in terms of the alternatives to Keir Starmer and comparing them with him, who do you think comes closest to offers closest to what Tony Blair is talking about?
Well, I think the first thing is that Keir Starmer is super determined, and nobody should underestimate the determination of Keir Starmer as an individual. He is incredibly determined to stay in power. And, obviously there's lots of politics to come and go in the next few weeks, but there's no guarantee that Keir Starmer will not be the Prime Minister in 6 months' time. It is obviously highly likely that he will not be the Prime Minister in 6 months' time, but I don't think Labour would be wise to haste him out the door, because there's a bunch of things that Tony Blair said this morning which we've not really we've skirted around. One of which is people don't understand the depth and the importance of the relationship we have with the United States in security terms, that people just do not know, and that's not a criticism, but you and I know this from the positions that we've held in journalism, and these things matter. And so whoever becomes the next Prime Minister has to be trusted and build that relationship with the United States again. And I don't know if there's anybody particularly who would see themselves as the Blair sort of successor.
Angela Rayner. I can see Angie and Donald Trump having a great time.
Well, you never know, but what I would certainly say is that Wes Streeting, from a political policy perspective, would be somebody who is right out of the Blair mould.
Except the Labour Party members and MPs.
But he may not get the job, as you say. So, whoever's the next Labour leader has to be somebody who literally, mathematically can get the right numbers in his camp or her camp. And then also can stay in power, because that's not easy. Lots of people will be putting a pressure on a new Prime Minister to have a general election. And you know what? If I was Kemi Badenoch today and her advisors, I would be saying, let's leave the Labour Party to tear themselves apart on this Blair interview, because it definitely is a bombshell into the Labour Party, but also reform as well, and make sure that they are, pulling themselves apart on the policy side of things, because the Conservative Party, in my view, needs to be seen as the only grown-up in the room, so that when we get to a general election, people in the country say, actually, we need grown-ups now, and you may not love them, but that's where we're going to go.
We shall see. Well, Claire's certainly smiling at that. George Pascoe-Watson, great to talk to you, former political editor of The Sun. Thank you very much indeed. Claire, I mean, I always like talking to George, because he's now, he's an advisor. He knows how people think at that level. We'll have spoken to Tony Blair on many occasions as well. And I mean, I almost feel sorry for Keir Starmer. He hasn't got the personality, he hasn't got the brains and the quick-wittedness of Tony Blair, and he hasn't got the party support, but he also doesn't have a plan. And then you think, well, hold on a minute, you want to be Prime Minister? I've got no sympathy for you. There's just nothing in Tony Blair's analysis of what is going wrong that I don't agree with. The only thing is, as we were saying earlier, is his sins of omission, which is not mentioning quite a lot of the things that have been going wrong in the country are down to him.
Absolutely, and I think George just alluded to it. In the piece, it says you've got to have your tribe around you that are going to sort of almost circle the wagons, keep you safe, back you up, but also put the message out there, and that's where the coherent message and policy has to come in.
But then you have to believe in something.
You do, and this is what we've got. We've got a Prime Minister at the moment that believes in absolutely nothing. A change, apparently.
Change.
What does that mean?
I mean, it's just bizarre.
You can't even
it?
explain it.
Yeah, that's the thing. But again, people will say things. You know, you lot talked. You sounded like when you were last elected. You sounded like you believed in stuff. Yeah. Turns out, well, we certainly know with Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson doesn't believe in anything. I mean, anything. 12:22 is the time. I'm going to take a quick break. Then I'm going to get to your calls. Give us a call. Tony Blair says Keir Starmer has no coherent plan to fix Britain and says changing leader won't be enough to save Labour. Is he right? I mean, I would say he is right, but you've certainly not been holding a candle for Tony Blair today. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch on X at Talk TV. I'll get to some of those messages up next too. And of course, calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost 1, standard network rate message. Your call's up next. This is Talk.
The Crown is facing its gravest test in decades, and the royal tea from Talk is your front row seat. With royal reputations under pressure and probing questions about public trust, we unpack every twist and revelation with the biggest names in the business. From the throne room at Buckingham Palace to a mansion in Montecito, we follow every royal ripple. Never miss a moment of The Crown in crisis. Subscribe to the Royal Tea from Talk on the app or wherever you get your podcasts.
If your other half came home with £125,000 worth of motorhome, wouldn't you go, darling, where did you get that from? Yeah. Have that turned up on the driveway? Where did you get the motorhome from? It's a very expensive motorhome. £81,000 Jaguar, Volkswagen Golf, partly funded with stolen cash, luxury watches over 9,000 quid, Mont Blanc pens, a £3,232 coffee machine. What was the man doing?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. 12:25 is the time. Let's get straight to your calls. A lot of you calling in about Tony Blair and also actually about what the hell's going on in reform. James is in Devon, wants to talk about Sir Tony. James, what do you want to say?
Hiya, Julia. Julia, what can we say about Sir Tony? Sir Tony, the thing is with Sir Tony, he's old enough to remember. He's looking at the Labour Party and he's looking at Starmer and he's looking and he's going, oh my God, we have got a present-day Michael Foot in position here. We've got Andy Burnham coming in, Derek Hatton from Militant. We're going to have the Labour Party rip itself to pieces. And unlike in the 80s, there will not be enough time to rebuild Labour.
Yep.
Labour will be a finished entity, of course, what is happening today.
Yeah, that's fair. It's very interesting. I mean, he defeated the left, you know, to actually change the party and make them electable. And there is still this thing, and as other analysts have said today, there's still an awful lot in the Labour Party go, no, what the answer is moving to the left. They are under the illusion that the country is moving to the left. It's not.
It's not, Julia. And what they fail to understand is once the radical left were eliminated and Neil Kinnock came in, Neil Kinnock had to sacrifice the fact he'll never become Prime Minister because there wasn't enough time left for him.
Yeah.
Labour, what you're doing is ripping yourself apart. You're an absolute
careful
joke. I'm sorry about you. They're an absolute joke. Children in school could run the country more.
This is
clearly
true.
And properly.
Is there a Labour candidate right now? Is there somebody who you would vote for? Or like if Tony Blair was back leader, would you vote Labour?
You got me now, Julia.
I thought that was a long pause.
Sir Tony had the ability to govern. He had people in his cabinet which had different opinions and were able to do their jobs. What we've got here is nothing. We've got a failed Prime Minister, a failed cabinet, a failed budget. There is nobody in the Labour Party right now that could stand up and take up because their cards are marked for what they've done.
There you go. James knows where he stands on this. Thank you very much. Fantastic. Oh, I love that. Oh, thinking about that. Let's get to some of your texts and tweets on this. Tony Blair saying that Keir Starmer has no coherent plan to fix Britain. Marcus says Labour is finished. Bo says, and that's coming from Blair, the country's doomed. Alan says, for once I completely agree with Tony Blair. Stephen says, whether they know it or not, Labour are already done for. There's no saving them. Changing leader will not make a bit of difference. Mark says, a bloke who destroyed Britain talking about fixing Britain. What a clown show. Steve says, I really don't care if Labour doesn't exist after the next general election. They're irrelevant, as are the Conservatives. A new political era is beginning and the cosy Labour Conservative duopoly is over. I've got to be honest with you, you're still going to have parties on the centre-left and the centre-right, whatever they're called. I mean, again, my thing is, like, genuinely, it's like when people talk about reform and things as being like, you know, on the, I mean, idiot things saying far right. It's not remotely far right, even Kemi Badenoch taking the party to the right. Are you kidding me? I mean, the Tory party, as was in power, was basically Tony Blair's Labour Party. Yeah. Our politicians have shifted massively to the left, while the country's gone, we're all just staying where we are, and now you're calling us far-right bandwagon jumping bigots. We haven't moved. We're just, but on their analysis, we're all far right now. Rohan says, if you think Labour, the Conservatives, the Lib Dems, or even Reform, aka the Tory lights, he says, are the answer, then you don't understand the problem. Unfortunately, I don't see a political party that will sort out the mess our country is in. And Kyle says, I don't think anyone cares what Tony Blair thinks. Well, I mean, judging by my board, I think a lot of people do. Let's go to Richard now. He's on the phone line in London. Richard, you want to talk about Nigel Farage. What do you want to say?
Well, I think there's a link between what Blair is saying, because Blair is castigating Labour for having come into power without a plan or a vision, and he's saying that even if they change Starmer, they still haven't got a vision. And I think this battle that's between Zia and Jenrick, I'm just wondering, Julie, if this is the sort of first, if these are the first shots in a long-term succession plan, because I'm just not sure. I don't see Nigel Farage necessarily leading Reform into the next election. I think
you think he's not going. Not just he won't win. You think he won't be the leader?
I think he's built quite an unstable team there. There's history between Zia and Jenrick anyway. And
just to get people up to speed, there's been a spat between them of actually something Jenrick said about deporting people who are here legally working or not working, but they've got a council house and they wouldn't necessarily be deported after being asked on the Sunday shows. And Zia Yusuf has gone, I'm a Home Affairs shadow spokesman. Yeah, they will.
I mean, they shouldn't be having that discussion in public.
No.
And I think the thing that occurs to me is that Rupert Local's famously said that Nigel is regarded as a messiah, but look what happened to the other messiah. That's what happened. That's why.
But Rupert Lowe is the sort of messiah in his party. I mean, this is the thing, isn't it? It's just, by definition, if you want to be the Prime Minister of this country, you want to lead a political party, you've got an ego. I don't have a problem with someone having an ego as long as they've got something to back it up. And Nigel Farage's argument is, look, I've been right on all the big issues, and it is his his personality and his personal style that has got his party from nowhere to being leading the polls, national polls, for over a year, and his way of the highway. I mean, realistically, isn't that kind of how an awful lot of political movements work, and indeed how businesses work? The boss gets to tell you what to do.
I just think that the inability to come up with a kind of vision is again to go back to Blair's point. They just haven't come up with that.
You were saying you mean like a positive vision, like it's more of a sort of we don't want this, we don't want that, as opposed.
About the votes,
but isn't it about British culture? Isn't it about being patriotic and about believing in Britain and believing in British people and not bringing in, half the third world?
But there's just so much more in terms of what a governing party needs, and this new policy about they don't want to tax overtime. I mean, that's again, it sounds like policy being made on the hoof, because I mean that's a Trump policy, and most British workers will tell you they already work unpaid overtime, and so in a way it's kind of impractical. So I just sense that this is a team that isn't really working.
Okay.
And the funny thing is, it's not just Farage. I don't think Kemi is the right person to lead the Conservatives, because she's another one. She's a queen bee. I'm just glad we've got 3 years.
I really, really don't think you can run political parties by committee. I think that's where Keir Starmer falls down, is that he doesn't really believe in anything. He hasn't really got the ego, the personality. Well, he's got the ego, but it's misplaced. And that's why you don't get any coherent policies or vision, because he doesn't have one. Really appreciate, fascinating call there, Richard. Thank you very much indeed. 12:33 is now. Claire Pearsall, what did you make of what you had to say about Nigel Farage and indeed about Kemi Badenoch?
I think if you try and run political parties by committee, you get the Liberal Democrats, and therefore nothing happens, and it's just whatever you want that day.
But a lot more kayaking, swings and roundabouts.
Exactly. Depends what you want for your country, doesn't it? If you want to slip and slide.
That's exactly what we are, a slip and slide country. 12:34 is the time. Love to hear more of your thoughts. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Up next, we are going to be talking about that extraordinary case of the teenage rapists who were let off prison. But what is the sentence they could have got and could get from the Court of Appeal? And why on earth would any judge give such a lenient sentence to multiple repeat gang rapists? That's up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk the Home of Common Sense. We were talking about Tony Blair saying, the government doesn't have a plan. And we've also, of course, we definitely know net zero is one of the issues there. And we've also been talking about that off-gem price hike from July, £221 more on the average household bill for their joint gas and electricity. But don't worry, the government is giving us that. You remember that summer of savings? We talked about that at the end of last week. We had this absurd announcement from Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, about, you're going to be able to have a slight discount. It's not guaranteed. The business doesn't have to give you the discount, but they're going to cut, VAT on going to, Legoland and Alton Towers and the like, and you're going to get sort of, cheaper meals for your kids and free bus fares in August. But also, crucially, they were going to have everyday essentials that would see lower prices due to planned tariff cuts. Admitting, by the way, that they have taxes on food which actually make our prices more expensive right now. They have now published the list of 125 everyday essentials that will see lower prices. Now, they include, baked beans, bread, chocolate, absolutely everyone, everyday essential. Various citrus fruits, crisps. I mean, I'm liking this so far. There are things like margarine, jams and marmalades, olive oil, pizzas and quiches. Apparently quiches are required. Soups and broths. Ketchup, tomato sauce, vegetable oils, all those things, they're on the list. Non-alcoholic beverages, apparently. But they've also, it's quite a lot of woke. I mean, avocados, they're on. Couscous. Fonio, never heard of it. Apparently it's some sort of a grain from Africa. Quinoa's on it. Marzipan's on it. Marzipan, couscous and quinoa, are they actually essential goods, are they? I mean, Claire, maybe in your house, I don't know.
No, they're not essential
Maybe
goods.
at a Whole Food cafe in Hackney.
I mean, I kind of like them, but there's no peanut butter.
No one likes quinoa.
There's no peanut butter.
By the way, should we pronounce
quinoa?
There's no peanut butter on there.
There's no peanut butter. Get rid of the marzipan, put on the peanut butter.
She's going on strike. She's upset. But this is just absolute nonsense. This is how. Can you imagine Tony Blair writing his 5,700 essay after that? This is not. I mean, this is how rubbish they are. You thought they were rubbish. They're even more rubbish than you thought. Look, let's talk about something far more serious. Let's talk about the basic levels of right and wrong and justice in this country. And I think we can all agree, anyone half sensible, anyone with any remote sense of morality, that the extraordinary situation where two boys, teenage boys, who committed multiple rapes, gang raping a 14-year-old girl and a 15-year-old girl, one of them at knife point, both repeatedly, and another boy who egged them on, filmed it on their cameras and put it out on the social media, laughing as they gang raped innocent teenage girls. They were spared custody last week. Those cases, those three boys, they have been referred by Lord Homer, the Attorney General, to the Court of Appeal over what he believes are unduly lenient sentences. Well, let's talk about this with Sir Michael Ellis-Casey. He's a barrister and former Attorney General himself. A very good afternoon to you, Sir Michael.
Hello, good afternoon, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. First of all, if you were Attorney General and this case came before your attention, it was obviously all over front pages, people absolutely horrified by this sentence, which was not a single minute behind bars and just referral orders. Would you have referred this to the court?
Almost certainly, yes. I mean, obviously, you can't say that definitively without having seen all of the papers that the Attorney General will see. But I referred dozens of cases to the Court of Appeal when I was Attorney General under Boris Johnson and again in 2022. What is relevant here, though, is that it's the judges in the Court of Appeal that will be the ones making the decision, Julia, about whether to increase the sentence or leave it as it is. And you've been talking today about Tony Blair quite a bit. And one of the things that Tony Blair did, one of the many structural changes that he made to this country, which I think were for the worst, was that he created these sentencing guidelines that are really at the root of where things have been going wrong. Not just in this case, but in so many cases, because if the judge is following guidelines, the Court of Appeal is going to have difficulties interfering with the sentence. Even if those guidelines are out of kilter, which I personally think they are, with what the general public expect.
That's part of the issue, isn't it? Because we know the sentencing guidelines, because of their use, the argument that they had actually stuck to the orders, restricting what they could do before the case came to trial. But they were kind of praised by the judge, but also the extraordinary comment by the judge in the court saying that he didn't want to unnecessarily criminalise these young men. There was concern about they had very low IQ. One of them has ADHD. I mean, I don't care what your IQ is. I don't care about your ADHD. Both girls, it's not like there was, not this would make it okay, but if there was one rape, or was it date rape, wasn't it? Did he think that, we're talking about girls at night, but one in an underpass, one in a field, raped multiple times on camera, one at knife point, her clothes cut off, and laughing about it, being ignored. There's no one in the world that would have thought that wasn't a crime. And the big concern is that the mitigating factors, the fact that low IQ, don't really understand the seriousness of the crime or what they've done, those are actually aggravating factors. If they don't think they did anything wrong, what's to stop them from doing it again, especially when they didn't get punished for doing it this time?
Well, this is the problem, Julia. I mean, it's sending the wrong message to potential offenders anywhere and everywhere. Look, people will always put their mitigation before the court, but the court has the job of juxtaposing any mitigating features there might be, including the age and personal characteristics of a defendant, with the gravity of the offence and justice that is due to the victim or victims of an offence, and what the general public expect. We're getting out of kilter, I think, in our criminal justice system with what the general public expect. And I'm afraid the government is continuing to push in that direction, because there's a proposal from David Lammy to increase the age of criminal responsibility from 10 to 14. That would be rather inconsistent, because these individuals, I believe, were said to have committed these offences. They're 15 now, but the offence was well over a year ago. So they were 14 or maybe even younger. But they also want to reduce the time spent in custody. In other words, increase the early release scheme. And, as well as doing that, scrapping the ability of judges to pass shorter sentences. So we've really got to make sure that that the system doesn't break any further than it already has.
But I wonder how so much of this is just the fact that we haven't got many prison spaces. We probably haven't got many, young offender spaces. So let's let these people off. But even when people do get sentenced, even when men get sentenced, largely men, violent crimes, only men for rape, when they do get sentenced to, if these boys were 18 and they got sentenced, to the highest level, they would only serve a few years behind bars anyway. And there is this concern, and you mentioned one of the things that David Lammy is looking at again is basically more focus on and the sentencing guidelines that we saw being brought in by the Sentencing Council. On their personal characteristics, which meant that someone should not get such a tough sentence. I wonder, and I think a lot of people are questioning now, the 3 boys who were involved in these rapes were from the traveller community. Now, this is regarded as a minority group that suffers from disadvantage and discrimination, and this could be used in a court by defence lawyers and seen by a judge as somehow a mitigating factor. Well, they're having a difficult life, and lots of people are, don't like travellers. So it's for some reason then it's okay to gang rape girls.
Look, you've got a point, Julia, because you may remember it was about a year ago when the Sentencing Council was criticised, fiercely criticised, because it was accused of a 2-tier justice. Where have we heard that phrase before? Because they were arguing in one of their papers that reference should be had to ethnicity and gender, and that should make different sentences for different characteristics, personal characteristics of defendants. And of course, they very soon had to row that back. They were criticised from all sides. So I think there's something wrong with the Sentencing Council. I don't think we need another quango. This is where Tony Blair comes in again, because he created this quangocracy that now basically rules the country. a number of
unelected, unaccountable,
and
do what they sodding well want. But this is it. Judges, lawyers argue the case. Judges or juries, make the decision on guilt or innocence. Judges carry out the sentencing based on the law made by our elected representatives. And I don't think people feel that these people are accountable to us anymore.
Well, the problem is this won't be just the judge alone. We do have judges who pass severe sentences, and if it's manifestly excessive, a sentence can be reduced in the Court of Appeal.
But it shouldn't be that unpredictable. I don't want a judge saying, "Oh, we've got a tough job," or "We've got an easy judge."
I'm afraid it's human nature, though, Julia. I mean, I appeared in court for many years, prosecuting and defending cases, and you will get judges who have a reputation for being lenient and others who have a reputation for being severe. That's just part of human nature. Some juries will acquit, another jury in the next door courtroom might have convicted. Yeah. We will never know. But what I think we do have to say is we've got this unduly lenient sentencing scheme. Judges do occasionally increase sentences. If these individuals had been adults, the sentence would have been, in my view, almost certainly over 10 years. Is it right to say that because they are the age that they are, that it makes that much difference? Young offender institutions are available for people aged 15 years and over, and there are secure training centres and secure schools for people all the way down to the age of 10. But, I think that where we are really creating a bad precedent is these increasing number of cases where the public feel that the criminal justice system is completely out of kilter with their expectations.
I couldn't agree with you more, other than the fact people don't feel it, they see it and they know it, and that's the difference.
The needle has moved too far, Julia.
Absolutely. So, Michael, we'll have to leave there. So, Michael Ellis, KC barrister and former Attorney General, thank you very much. Claire Pearce, so just your reaction to that, because one of the things that I find frustrating is people say, well, people want to be rehabilitated. There seems to be so much focus now, even from the judges, we want to rehabilitate. No, you punish first. Yes. You punish, you deter. But if you want to rehabilitate someone, by definition, they must accept the crime that they've committed, and therefore the punishment too. You can't rehabilitate someone who thinks it's okay to, at knife point, rape a 15-year-old girl repeatedly.
And surely this is what you put into your kids when they're young, that actions have consequences. And as you get older, should you break the law, there are going to be consequences.
Yours is what, 16? 17 now.
Yeah.
Do you think he at 14 knew whether it was okay to rape a woman or not, rape a girl?
Yeah.
Pretty sure he did. Weird that.
Yeah, because I taught him that, because that's my job as a parent.
I'm wondering if you even need to be taught that.
Well, I don't think you do, but I think you need to reiterate.
Yeah, just to clarify.
Yeah.
I mean, again, but who knows? Who knows what's going on there? Court of Appeal better make the right decision on that one. I think people are losing so much faith. They really are. Look, I'm going to cheer everyone up now. We're going to be talking in a few moments about NASA's plan to build a base on the moon. You know I love a happy boffin. We've got one coming up next. First up, though, travelling not quite so far afield as the moon, but to the World Cup. Got an amazing deal for you. The FIFA World Cup 2026 is almost here. Thanks to Adidas, the tournament's official match ball supplier. Our friends at TalkSport are giving you the chance to be there. Adidas is sending you and a friend to Dallas to see England v Croatia live on June the 17th. I say happy to be the friend. With return flights, accommodation, spending money, tickets, and your very own Adidas official match ball tray under. Be at England's first game in the FIFA World Cup in one of the world's best stadiums. Ready to get that winning feeling? Well, here's how to enter.
Get ready for that winning feeling. For your chance to win, head to TalkSportWin.com or text TALK to 83338. Texts and online entries cost £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or call 0343 418 7260. Lines close 1st of June 2026 at 4 p.m. That's when you'll need to answer your phone if it rings. 18 plus UK residents only. This is a network promotion. See full terms and conditions at TalkSport.com/win. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 83338 now. Full T's and C's at win.talk.tv.
The Crown is facing its gravest test in decades, and the royal tea from Talk is your front row seat. With royal reputations under pressure and probing questions about public trust, we unpack every twist and revelation with the biggest names in the business. From the throne room at Buckingham Palace to a mansion in Montecito, we follow every royal ripple. Never miss a moment of The Crown in crisis. Subscribe to the royal tea from Talk on the app or wherever you get your podcasts.
If your other half came home with £125,000 worth of motorhome, wouldn't you go, darling, where did you get that from? Yeah. Have that turned up on the driveway? Where did you get the motorhome from? It's a very expensive motorhome. £81,000 Jaguar, Volkswagen Golf, partly funded with stolen cash, luxury watches over 9,000 quid, Mont Blanc pens, a £3,232 coffee machine. What was the man doing?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. Well, complete change of tack now. Let's talk about something completely different from all of our earthly problems. Let's talk about building a base on the moon. This is what NASA is planning to do. They've released details of robotic landers, hopping drones and vehicles they aim to send to the moon as part of US plans to build a lunar base there. The space company Blue Origin, that's the one owned by the Amazon founder Jeff Bezos, is one of several companies picked to build the machines, and the US plan is to land Americans back on the moon before Donald Trump leaves office in 2029. Well, let's talk about this with space expert Andy Land. Very good afternoon to you, Andy.
Good afternoon.
Thank you so much for joining us. Well, of course, when we were talking last time about that amazing space flight round the other side of the moon and coming back again, it wasn't just about the pointlessness, just going round the moon or even landing a human being on the moon and waving to us, on camera. It was about building bases just like this. First of all, what is the purpose of them building these bases?
Number of reasons. There's the obvious one is scientific work, and to have a permanent base on the moon is much better for scientific work. In Apollo, astronauts dropped onto the surface of the moon, collected some samples, left some instruments, then came back. You really do need to do serious scientific work, and that means having astronauts on the moon for a long duration.
What do you mean by scientific work? Finding out whether there are, rare earth mineral or rare moon minerals? Well, what are they doing?
That's the spin-off which comes through it then, because then you're doing assessing to see what materials are available on the moon that we can actually use for mining, and that's for commercial purposes. But you also want to find out the age of the moon itself. The details of the rocks on the moon will give us an idea of how the solar system and the Earth formed itself, and give us an understanding of the wider universe. So there's a good reason to actually go there for what we call basic hardcore science. But you're right, going there to assess what minerals are available there that can be used for mining operations, rare earth metals, iridium, material like that we need in our electronics, that's needed. Possibly the discovery of helium-3 in the soil, which we would use for nuclear fusion power stations. And then the next phase for the moon would be the launching platform then to go to other parts of the solar system, because moon's gravity is 1/6 of that of the Earth, so therefore launching vehicles from the moon beyond our system to Mars and beyond would be much more efficient to actually do that.
So we're looking at some point, we're not talking about, we've seen some science fiction films, a little pod in the corner. We are talking about them building sort of mini cities on the surface of the moon.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I mean, I was sitting through it, listening to the announcements. It was quite remarkable what they were looking at.
You were loving it, weren't you?
I was. Three good phases which were going in there. The experiment and learn, between now and 2029, a very short period of time, sending these what they call moonfall, these little robotic hoppers, which will hop around, and they were looking at something in 1,000 square miles of lunar area they want to look at, which I thought was quite interesting. It was a good question from the floor from a journalist asking, well, are you sort of planning your boundaries that this is American territory only? And they were very keen to point out, no, they're going to stick to the space treaty, 1967 Outer Space Treaty, and I think that's a nod to point out to China, stick by the rules.
And explain about this, because lots of people think it's like the Wild West. Basically, first person to put their flag there, you own it. But there's been this deal, hasn't there, that basically, the moon is owned by everybody on Earth.
That's right. Yes, this is why when the Americans landed on the moon, they said we came in peace for all mankind. That wasn't just just a statement. That was actually emphasised in the 1967 Outer Space Treaty, and it's very similar to the Antarctic Treaty. Nobody actually claims Antarctica. They sort of put their scientific basis in the area and administer that area. And therefore, although having said that, that's got a little bit more of a boundary than the Outer Space Treaty. But I think America's big push now, which is why this meeting was held, to outline their plans. I mean, bear in mind they want the human presence there by 2032 onwards, which is quite very close. $20 billion. I mean, but hey, this is the thing that got to me. You do realise that we'll have a base on the moon with humans in it before HS2 is actually running? Can you believe that?
That tells you everything. That tells you everything. I guess you don't have so many planning problems, do you? On the moon, indeed. But of course, I mean, this is part of the race, and we saw that space race. We know when JFK was in office. Actually. There is that whole thing where there's competition from China, from Russia, I imagine India as well. Everyone wants to start hitting into space, and basically you want to be the first.
That's right. I mean, and especially with Trump. Trump is very keen, of course, he likes to be first in everything, which is really quite useful for scientists. If you've got a political mass who wants to be first at everything, you think, oh, opportunity here. Yeah. He wants to be there before the Chinese do to get back on the moon. So that's really important. Yeah. And that's going to push this forward. And also, the technology lead America will get by developing the technologies to go to the moon will give American industry in technology a lead on the rest of the world, which again is something people often forget. That's one of the big pushes for this.
Yeah, and again, you and I have talked about this so many times. Whenever we have this sort of space exploration, it's good for mankind, good for our knowledge, good for scientific development, but loads of the things we benefit from on Earth actually come out of this sort of technological driving. And again, it's what human beings do, isn't it? We're adventurous, we travel, we want to forge ahead. Andy Lown, you know I love a happy space boffin. You are today's happy space boffin. I always. Space expert Andy Lown, fantastic stuff there. Claire Pissell, do you get excited by this sort of stuff?
Oh, absolutely. What's not to love about it? And I'd like to volunteer to go up there. I can't do any...
you were going to send I volunteered to send the husband.
No, let me go. I can't do any science, but
do you know what?
Have a bit of peace and quiet.
Do you know what, though? I reckon if Nicola Sturgeon's then husband, Peter Murrell, went off to the moon and got a space buggy, she wouldn't notice. She wouldn't notice. No, my husband spent 20 billion on a space project to the moon.